Chapter 606. Equipped with the most advanced soul furnace, all the actions of the radiant moon circlet were carried out by its own consciousness. After sensing the deadly threat of the eternal light, it immediately began to extract terrifying energy from the supply device. The amethysts in the depths of Floating City lit up one after another, and then it switched to attack. All of this was done in an instant. Before Odin could withdraw her hand holding the eternal spear, the radiant moon circlet's counterattack had already arrived. Boom! The violent explosion overturned all the creator puppets around, and Odin was smashed to the ground. Then, one after another, a deep pit hundreds of meters in diameter and dozens of meters deep was opened up in the battlefield of Koer. The residual blue light of magic wandered in the pit like water. Has she been killed? The commanders of Floating City whispered. The radiant moon circlet gave them a response. The explosion continued, and a storm of offensive magic poured down. This was a saturation attack that was enough to cover the entire battlefield, but it was squandered in the deep pit below that was covered in smoke and gravel. At this time, a gust of wind suddenly rose in Koer, and the blood-stained war flag flapped loudly. The temperature seemed to have dropped by a dozen degrees in an instant, and even the excellent orcs could not help but shiver. The deep pit was dark, and even the light was swallowed up. Odin let out a slight groan, which quickly turned into a horrifying growl. Her blood boiled like raging magma, and the dragon's spell worked. The dragon genes that she had been suppressing with divine power and divinity all these years were awakened again. The nerves all over her body were burning, and the seal in the depths of her mind seemed to have cracked open, and the dark purple light overflowed like the tide in the abyss. The armor broke, and the little girl's body swelled and deformed. The pale bone armor covered the surface of her body, and the dark purple scales buckled together. The huge black membrane wings suddenly spread out, and the Twilight Lord stuck its head out and climbed out of the bottomless pit. It looked up at the radiant moon's circlet in the sky. Its vertical eyes were fascinating, but there was a majesty that was difficult to look directly at. The waves of magic were still going on, but they could not move forward even an inch. Odin took a deep breath, as if she wanted to suck all the air in the world into her lungs. Then, she intimidated the space, causing all the nearby magic to be trapped in the distorted void. Blackwing Empire, Northern Court. Inside the conference hall, Caesar and the court lords stared at the projected image of Koer City. This was synchronized with the projection in the Steel Graveyard Command Center. The successful implementation of the Steel Graveyard strategic plan allowed the Blackwing Empire to have the ability to monitor every corner of their sphere of influence. On the continent map in the command center, every battlefield was marked in real time and displayed as a red dot of varying brightness according to the intensity of the battle. Caesar and the other lords of the court were paying the most attention to Koer City. Its markings on the map of the continent were so red that they were almost black. The determination of the empire on which the sun never sets is much stronger than I thought. The black dragon muttered to himself in a low voice. His vertical eye blinked, and his pupils were gloomy. The one blocking His Highness Odin is the Daybreak Legion, the main force of the unfallen empire. Hogg clenched his claws. They are not willing to let the war spread to the territory of the Rising Sun City. They intend to squeeze our blood dry in the central region. Daybreak Legion, Floating City, Radiant Moon Ring. Caesar got down from his throne and paced around the hall while wagging his tail. Using these things to deal with my daughter, Enrique. What are you going to use to deal with me? Radiant Moon Ring. Hogg muttered. I remember many years ago, Corgi mentioned this weapon and told us to be careful. It seemed to have left a deep impression on him. A weapon that even the gods' eye is afraid of. Garen interrupted. He walked to Caesar's side and raised his head. I'm guessing that even Odin can't defeat it easily. Orderonzo, we still need reinforcements at the front line. You plan to go to the front line? Caesar glanced at his brother. All right, but your battlefield is not in Koer. It's in Svojar. Svojar? Garen widened his eyes and tried to search for this place in his memory. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not remember where this place was. Caesar waved his claws and displayed the holographic projection of the Iradia continent. He moved his claw down and pointed at the intersection of the Deep South Sea and the land. The Deep South Sea is nothing more than the Star Sea, the Cold Sea, and the Cosworth Sea. Together, they form the Southern Territorial Sea of the Rising Sun City. That country has a coastline of nearly 1,000 kilometers. Svojar is your target. Garin calmed his mind and looked at where the Black Dragon Emperor was pointing. On the winding coastline, the open terrain of Scottsdale came into view. Orderonzo, are you planning to fight on multiple fronts and open up a second battlefield? Garin's sensitivity to military strategy was far beyond the reach of other lords. When the Black Dragon Emperor pointed at him, he immediately understood Caesar's intention. That's right. The Rising Sun City Empire has invested their superior forces in the central region because they don't want the flames of war to burn their land. However, the Blackwing Empire will not let them have their way. Caesar bared his fangs. As long as my clan lands in Scottsdale, it will be too late for Enrither to send reinforcements. We don't have a teleportation circle. Just the long journey of the fleet into the Rising Sun City Empire's territorial sea is a huge problem. There are also a series of problems, such as logistics and manpower. Although Garin was talking about the problems, his dragon face showed an eager expression. If we can land successfully, we can complete a pincer attack on the Rising Sun City Empire. At that time, whether we launch a sneak attack or use Scottsdale as the main battlefield, they will be attacked from both sides. You don't have to worry about the teleportation circle. Caesar said. He had just gone to the Deep Sea Kingdom not long ago and reached an agreement with the rulers of the Sea Folk. The few demonic fish at the bottom of the sea promised to provide all the help they could to the Blackwing Empire. Building a few teleportation circles and platforms in the Sea of Stars was not a problem. You just have to think of a way to land in Scottsdale. Garin nodded. The central battlefield. I heard that the Rising Sun Army of the Rising Sun City Empire is invincible in Iradia. Moreover, they have war weapons like the Radiant Moon Ring and Floating City. With Odin's current strength, it won't be easy to win. The Rising Sun Army once entered the Abyss to fight against the demon invasion. Of course, I know that. However, I don't think any of the tribes sent by the Blackwing Empire to the central region will admit that they are inferior to the Rising Sun Army. Black Dragon's vertical eye blinked and revealed a ferocious smile. His words were profound. Whether the Rising Sun Army can stop my daughter is still unknown. The Rising Sun Army has already revealed its trump card. Its trump card is Floating City and Radiant Moon Ring. My daughter has only revealed her true self now. Chapter 607. Odin raised her head, her dark golden eyes burning with flames without any heat. It was as if there was an invisible domain suppressing the surrounding sound and wind. In the silence, the scattered clouds gathered and rolled in the sky. She glanced at the eternal spear lying not far away, lowered her head, and silently swallowed it into her throat. After a short moment of silence, the huge membrane wings suddenly flapped, and Odin soared into the sky, dragging her long tail behind her. Between stillness and movement, her aura surged like a tsunami, and the peace on the battlefield was once again torn apart. The Radiant Moon Ring still carried a cold and quiet pressure. Energy surged, and magic burst forth once again. Odin had already arrived at Floating City in the blink of an eye. Her speed was several times faster than before, and her membrane wings were like cold knives cutting through the solid walls of Floating City, creating a large number of sparks. Odin, who had revealed her true form, had inherited her father's powerful strength. Her fighting style was the same as the Black King's, fierce and efficient. She circled around Floating City, biting and tearing. Her two wings carried a fierce wind. There were no feints or dodges, and every claw attack was full of strength, enough to split mountains and split rocks. Odin Tangerine's body flowed with the purest blood of the Black King. This kind of bloodline was not something that any of the Penishade dragons of Iradia could compare to. Even the three legendary dragon species of the astral plane, the power dragon, the rainbow dragon, and the time dragon, could not possess such unparalleled strength. The radiant moon ring's magic was unstoppable, but it was difficult to do anything to Odin. Floating city rumbled, and the walls dyed black by the demon's blood peeled off again and again. Seeing that the first princess had the upper hand, the Blackwing clan's morale soared. The war drums boomed, and Odin's attacks became more and more fierce. However, no matter how strong Odin was, he was unable to open up the internal structure of the floating city. His sharp claws were like thunder, and his dragon flames were fierce. Although the walls of the floating city were constantly being peeled off, they were quickly reconstructed by magic and continued to operate smoothly. Odin was shocked. She had a great power that came from the blood of the Black King, and this power could force the gods to retreat and make demons bow. So far, only the Abyss King Asliers could block this power. But in the blink of an eye, she had attacked Floating City dozens of times, and under the iron wall of defense, every time she attacked, she returned without success. The radiant moon ring twisted, and for the first time, Odin defended, flapping her dragon wings to avoid the attack of the radiant moon ring. She knew very well that this ring was an emotionless weapon of war. It could constantly gather information about her, and after analyzing it, the radiant moon ring's every attack would be more targeted and more threatening than the last. Twilight King, who had been attacking like a tide, suddenly retreated. He raised his head and stood still. Annihilation. Odin's dragon face showed a solemn expression, and a voice came from her throat, as if she was giving an order to the whole world. She took a deep breath and then exhaled. Odin's breath was different from that of her kind. There was no explosion or blazing light in her mouth, but it seemed that something terrible was released. The surrounding clouds flickered a few times, then turned into distorted shadows and suddenly disappeared. At the same time, when these clouds disappeared, the space in front of Odin began to collapse, and an uncontrollable storm swept up in the chaos. Not far away, the surface of Floating City's walls were rapidly dissolving, like a pot of boiling water evaporating in the air. The effect was still spreading. With Floating City as the center, dozens of surrounding air fortresses and the attacking radiation dragons were all swallowed up by the space, and not even a trace of flesh and blood was left. The distorted light and shadows were the proof of their existence. An indescribable confrontation was going on inside the Floating City. The radiant moon halo was doing its best to maintain its own existence. As the ultimate weapon of arcane engineering, it still managed to capture traces of Odin's breath at the critical moment. The breath that could not be seen at all originated from the void, attacking the existence of the physical plane from another plane, distorting the target's order structure. Once successful, the target would lose its stable state of the physical plane, disintegrating and vanishing. The targets destroyed by the annihilation breath did not turn into a pile of charred remains due to the high temperature and explosion. Instead, due to the collapse of the order structure, they were instantly washed into a pile of basic elements, which was much more terrifying than turning into a pile of charred remains. Praise Pyro. At the critical moment when the annihilation breath was about to destroy the radiant moon ring's collapse point, the mark left by the prime god once again showed its power. The light of the sun was omnipresent, and there was no blind spot to protect Floating City, eliminating the annihilation breath of the Twilight Lord. Damn it! Odin's dragon face showed a depressed expression. I can't do anything about this guy. Odin, you big idiot. Bulonia tiptoed and leaned on the wall of Koa, looking up at the sky. You can stop Floating City and the radiant moon ring. That's enough. Is that supposed to be encouragement? Bulonia made a face at the sky and no longer looked at Odin. He lowered his head and ordered the leaders of the Blackwing clan, prepare the army. The gray horses will be the vanguard. Charge forward. The Blackwing clan, who had been waiting silently, finally moved. The army surged forward like a tide. The huge feet of the monsters kicked up dust, and a gray heat wave rose in front of Koa. The opponent was also advancing. The huge human army had already assembled. The mounted archers slid like snakes on both sides of the battlefield, while the pike riders occupied the center of the battlefield. After accelerating, the war horses finally left the rolling smoke. These pike riders, who were covered in divine blessing, gathered into a white wave on the flat ground. The last time the Dawn Army gathered and charged like this was in the Gilal Plains of the Abyss battlefield. At that time, the Lord of the Abyss and the demon soldiers were shocked. This was because they had never seen a human who dared to charge at them like this. This was not a tactic that humans should use against demons. The Dawn Army charged forward without fear of death. The war horses jumped over traps, acid, and the corpses of their companions. They risked their lives to stab the demon's heart with their spears. Every one of them was like a human hero in the epic. They were not afraid of death, but the demons were afraid. The chaotic demons were unable to resist the charge of such a group. They collapsed upon contact, and even the roars of the abyssal lords could not get them to regroup. The Dawn Army rushed forward like a tide, leaving behind countless charred corpses on the Gilal Plains. In that battle, the Dawn Army defeated the entire army led by the abyssal lords of the 545th and 546th floors. In the analysis of the Blackwing Empire's royal court, disregarding courage, discipline, and a series of other factors, the strength of the Dawn Army's pike riders lay in their mobility. Their war horses did not wear horse armor, and the riders only wore a thin layer of leather armor. They relied on the divine blessings and divine blessings of the priests to provide security. Hence, the Dawn Army's first method of victory was to charge forward quickly. Before the demons could organize an effective defensive formation, the pike riders had already torn apart the front of the demon wave and pierced into their abdomen like lightning. Before the demons could fill the gap and complete the encirclement, the mounted archers and mages behind them used arrows and magic to suppress the demons' movements. When the main force of the Dawn Army arrived, no matter how terrifying and huge the demons were, they could only become lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The Dawn Army was invincible. The charging cavalry was like a rapidly advancing chariot. The sharp spears and halberds were like a forest. In a situation where they did not move, no matter who faced them, they would be smashed into rocks by the huge waves. White arrowheads protruded from the tide. The strongest and most experienced veterans gathered at the front of the pike riders. They were the pioneers, the ones who broke the formation. Every one of them had the blood of the demons on their hands. However, when they saw the cavalry charging towards them, a chill ran through their bodies. Unlike the human pike cavalry, Blackwing's Gray Centaur cavalry were fully equipped heavy cavalry. All of them were wearing standard armor forged by the dwarves. Only a pair of black eyes were exposed. Their weapons were impact cavalry spears that had to be held with both hands. On the back of their legs, there was a hammer used for close combat. These fellows were genuine heavy cavalry. They were also the strongest heavy cavalry in the history of Iradia. Spread out. Let those monsters in. General Lion, who was in Floating City, ordered. No commander of an army would let the light cavalry and heavy cavalry clash. This was because no matter the situation, the charging power of the light cavalry and the heavy cavalry were not on the same level. Charging in like this was tantamount to being slaughtered by the gray cavalry. The magic waves transmitted the order of the general clearly to the ears of every soldier. The strong discipline and execution of the Dawn Army were highlighted. The leading 100 captains and 1,000 captains rode their horses to the sides. With the coat of arms on their backs as a symbol, the huge light cavalry divided into two. It was like a piece of white paper being cut by a sharp knife. They avoided the unstoppable Blackwing Empire's heavy cavalry. After the light cavalry split up, the crossbowmen and mages at the back immediately threw a large number of arrows and fire into the open space. The strength of the Blackwing Empire's heavy cavalry could be seen at a glance when the attacks landed. Ordinary cavalry did not have the protection of armor. When faced with attacks, it was inevitable that they would have to control their speed to dodge. Even with the blessing of the hymn, they had to be careful of the power of the opponent's magic. However, the Blackwing Empire's heavy cavalry only lowered their heads and continued forward. Although the spells and armor-piercing arrows could cause effective damage to the Grey cavalry, they could not stop their advance. Chapter 608. Have the middle army retreat layer by layer. General Lion ordered from Floating City. The middle army of the Dawn Army retreated. At this moment, the formations on the left and right flanks immediately protruded. A huge empty space formed in the middle of the Dawn Army, and a pocket was formed to encircle the Blackwing Cavalry. The commander of the Grey Centaurs, Kedin Burnmain, who had been mutated by radiation, held a steel spear and rushed to the front. He was over 2 meters tall and was covered in black heavy armor. A dragon-like roar came from his throat. When he rushed to the front of the Dawn Army, the enemy's middle army had already retreated, leaving only a small number of spearmen to cover the rear. For the Black Emperor, Kedin carried the momentum of a hurricane and did not care about the spear tip that was getting closer and closer. He raised his spear and stabbed forward. The heavy cavalry followed behind him like a tide. The spearmen covering the rear were like weak wooden stakes in front of the Grey Centaurs. They collapsed upon contact and were trampled into blood under the hooves of the Grey Centaurs. Seeing the retreat of the Dawn Army, the momentum of the monsters became stronger. They let out loud roars and advanced faster than expected. They easily tore open a huge gap and stabbed forward with their spears, chasing after the enemy who tried to resist. Suddenly, a loud horn sounded from Coer City. That was the headquarters of the Blackwing clan. Kedin looked up and realized that the radiation dragon in the sky was not synchronized with them. Instead, it was blocked by a continuous stretch of sky fortresses. Princess Bulonia wants us to retreat. Kedin was slightly shocked. Is this an ambush? In just a moment of thinking, Kedin saw smoke billowing in front of him. The retreating Dawn soldiers were actually holding their shields and pushing back. The left and right flanks were also surrounding them. The Dawn spearmen had avoided the Grey Centaurs and were currently fighting with the Orc infantry, trying to cut off their reinforcements. Grey Centaurs, listen to my orders. Break open the path. Kudan raised his spear and roared. He was not worried that he would fall here. With the combat strength of the Grey Centaurs, there was not a single cavalry unit in all of Aladia that could contend against them. If the humans thought that they could block the iron hooves of the northern heavy cavalry by raising their shields in a hurry, they would be underestimating the Blackwing clan. Once the clan commander gave the order, the messy Grey Centaurs immediately calmed down. They raised their spears and moved their hooves to get into formation, forming a neat front line. With a roar, close to 100 Grey Centaurs charged forward at the same time. They accelerated in a very short distance and charged towards the shield wall raised by the Dawn Legion. A series of metal clashing sounds rang out in the field. These monsters are not bad. General Lion narrowed his eyes. But the commander behind them is a complete idiot. He is too slow. Sparks flew from the shield, but it only moved back a little and was not destroyed. No, Kedin panted. He knew the strength of his companions. Only the strongest and bravest of the Grey Centaurs were qualified to wear heavy armor. They were more or less distorted by the radiation, but even so, they could not break through the shield wall of the Dawn Army. Thousands of spears pierced through the gaps between the shields. The square tusk shields made of bronze were rapidly adjusting, but Dan couldn't see what was happening behind the shields. However, from the spreading energy waves, the spellcasters of the Dawn Army were constantly strengthening the shield wall, turning this temporary defense into a sturdy wall that was difficult to destroy. Kedin saw part of a large magic puppet's body through the gaps in the wall. He guessed that the Dawn Army had used these war puppets to block their advance. At this time, he began to regret. Princess Bulonia had ordered him to maintain the same pace and to charge together with the radiation dragon in the sky. However, he had thrown the order to the back of his mind because of his thirst for blood and lost all reinforcements. At this time, the iron wall shook. The grinding sound of the war puppet's machinery came from behind. Kedin watched as the sturdy wall pressed forward with thorny spears. The Grey Centaurs roared angrily. At this time, there was a sudden roar on the battlefield. This kind of roar might be unfamiliar to the army of the Empire where the sun never sets, but the Blackwing clan was very familiar with it. When the roar sounded, the gray centaurs, who had roared and decided to fight to the death, suddenly stopped their iron hooves and formed a circle to protect themselves. They pointed their spears around them. The tracks rolled. The huge armored tanks moved forward while firing. These tanks were of different sizes, but they were all heavier than adult dragons. The slowest guy at the back looked like a moving steel castle. They let out a thunderous sound from their abdomens. The long and thick muzzles spat out flames and smashed the magic barrier into pieces. "Black tusks," Lion said. This was not the first time these iron lumps had appeared. The Dawn Army had specific information about them. I didn't expect the Northern Empire to send them here so quickly. "Retreat," he ordered decisively. "General, we haven't," his adjutant shouted. They had successfully forced the Blackwing clan's vanguard into a desperate situation and could kill them all. If they retreated now, it would be tantamount to letting these abominable monsters escape. In this hasty battlefield, we can't break through the armor of those iron lumps. That is the Blackwing Empire's most sophisticated anti-magic armor, General Lion said calmly. Their weakness is at the bottom and the back. Retreat. Treat them well on the next battlefield. I will look forward to that day. The order was given. The Dawn Cavalry, who were constantly throwing arrows and magic to harass them, slowly stopped. The bronze shield wall below shook slightly, and a gap appeared in the direction of Kihor. Kedden was stunned for a long time before he realized that the Dawn Army had loosened the encirclement, exposing the gray centaurs to the artillery fire of the armored tanks. He raised his shield and retreated. Not fighting anymore? Odin sent a message to Bulonia. The gray centaur's charge has been stopped. The Dawn Army wants to leave. The tanks alone can't catch up with them, Bulonia said. You and the Radiation Dragon can't stop the Radiant Moon Circle and the Sky Fortress, right? In a small battle, we got enough information. Both sides suffered losses. It's not a bad ending to be able to force them to retreat. Odin was silent for a moment. He watched the floating city leave under the escort of many sky fortresses. He changed his form and landed beside Bulonia. He looked depressed. I have the blood of the Black King, the Eternal Spear, and the help of you and the Blackwing clan, but I can't fulfill my father's expectations and destroy the enemy. You're so bad. I'm going to be laughed at. Who will laugh at you? Your opponent is the Radiant Moon Circle. Bulonia tiptoed to hold her hand. But the Great Emperor's goal is to unify Iradia. There's no great benefit for us to confront the Dawn Army here. We have to think of a way. What way? I'll call Dad over. Odin tilted his head and thought. You don't know. Even now, I'm still scared when I see Dad. He can definitely crush that ring with one claw, regardless of whether it has the mark of the sun god or not. Don't. The Great Emperor has his own opponent. Otherwise, the empire on which the sun never sets would have surrendered long ago. Bulonia shook his head and winked at Odin. No matter what, the Radiant Moon Circle is just the technological crystallization of the magical civilization. It's not like our family doesn't have it. Do we? Why don't I remember? Odin was confused. Yes. Bulonia jumped up and gestured with his hands. It's that super big. You mean the starship left behind by Quel'Dorii? Odin asked in a low voice. Bulonia nodded wildly. Yes, it's the one that the Great Emperor seized in the New World. Last time, Dad secretly took me to see it. I heard that the Eyeball Lord has already fixed it. Then we have to find Teacher Cordy first. Chapter 609. Rammel was alone in his office on the ground floor of the castle. He sat behind a huge square table and worked with a magic wall lamp. The room was large, and a faded map hung on the wall. It was full of red and black markings. No one would have thought that the commander of the most powerful army in the southern front of the Empire of the Unsetting Sun, Rammel Kevin, who commanded 200,000 soldiers, was sitting in this inconspicuous, dilapidated castle. His task was to defend an extremely long coastline that stretched for nearly 1,000 kilometers, from the embankment of Balaloran across the entire Fernan province, all the way to the southern coast of the unsetting sun on the Red Dragon Peninsula. Ramel and his main force, the Surfer Legion, were concentrated in Blackrock City. This was the narrowest part of the Howling Strait, and also the place where the enemy was most likely to launch a landing attack. The old general took a sip of the strong tea and continued to write in the order. Every effort must be made to complete the construction of the obstacles. The enemy must pay a very high price before it is possible to land at low tide. All spellcasters are to do their best. A completion report must be submitted to the headquarters in 2 days. What he wanted to do was met with a lot of resistance in the Empire. Many nobles believed that war would not break out in the south. The Northerners would not be able to bypass Iradia and attack the southern coast of the Empire. Moreover, the Empire of the Unsetting Sun had officially become allies with the Deep Sea Kingdom. With the separation of the Sea Tribes, it would be even more difficult for Blackwing to cross the sea to launch a surprise attack. These voices of resistance converged into a powerful voice in the kingdom. Fortunately, Emperor Enrique was of the same opinion as Ramel. He still remembered that day when Enrique stood in front of the huge map spread out on the table and threw an unforgettable tantrum for 5 minutes. The Imperator hammered the map with his clenched fist as he roared at the old nobles. Blackwing might attack here, here, and anywhere else in sight. Have you old fogies lost your minds after living like a prince for such a long time? How can you use human thinking to predict the thoughts of monsters? Don't count on the Deep Sea Kingdom. The demonic fish hate us more than Blackwing. Once the dragon promises them more benefits, they will soon change sides. After everyone had left, Enraged met with him alone. You must do this, Ramel. You are the one I trust. I entrust you with the land of the South Bank and the lives of my soldiers. Don't let me down. After writing down the order, Ramel got up and opened the windows of the castle. Outside the window was a beautiful bed of roses, but it was now unrecognizable. Not long before dawn, a brief storm came from the Howling Strait. It swept through Blackrock City and quickly left, leaving behind only broken rose branches and petals. "Good morning, General." His adjutant, Shao Kuman, said, "We are ready to depart." Outside, in the quiet Blackrock town, the bells of the Petrov Church were ringing praise the sun. Every chime was exceptionally bright in the wind. It was time to go to the beach for an inspection. It was 6 in the morning. According to General Ramel's orders, the Southern Front Army erected heavy anti-landing obstacles on every possible landing spot along the coastline that stretched for thousands of miles. These obstacles included jagged iron nets, sharp tridents, and heavy iron stakes. The soldiers pushed them into the shallows or underwater. Along with these obstacles were extremely lethal magic traps. These ominous objects would explode immediately upon contact. Not only that, but Ramel had also ordered for traps to be set up on the beaches, reefs, ravines, and small roads leading inland. Spells of all kinds, from destructive lightning that could blow up a dragon, all the way to the nearly undetectable poisonous fog of madness. Now, the entire coastline was set up with 600,000 of these magic traps. He planned to set up another 400,000 in 2 days. Overlooking the coastline from behind the dense forest of traps and obstacles were the soldiers of the Southern Front Army. They waited in the forts, bunkers, and trenches. Every magic cannon that the Southern Front Army could collect was aimed at the sand from above. According to calculations, the firepower could be intersected. The reason why they were aimed at the sand instead of the sea was to give the enemy a powerful close-range shot. Ramel had prepared a bloody welcome ceremony for the enemy. In the history of the Iradia War, no one had ever set up such a large and deadly defensive formation. "General, will this place really be attacked?" Ramel's assistant, Shao, stood with him at the highest point of the coastline and looked down. In order to complete Ramel's plan, the Empire had sent tens of thousands of slaves, farmers, and laborers to the south coast. They worked day and night to build the fortifications, and many mortals died of exhaustion from the heavy work. The spellcasters did not have it easy either. Erecting a barrier that spanned thousands of miles in a short period of time required an astonishing number of spells. Rammel had used up all of his spellcasters, so much so that there was not a single mage holding a wand in the Fernan, Polo, and Bassa provinces. Even some of the royal mages had been mobilized for the construction of the South Coast defensive line. I'm not sure if Blackwing's monsters will come ashore here. Rammel shook his head. But the Emperor's decision is undoubtedly correct. Only by stationing ourselves here can we ensure the safety of the Empire's rear, allowing Lion and his Daybreak army to focus on battle. Otherwise, once those monsters attack and break through the defensive line and land on the South Coast, it will cause an unstoppable disaster. When that happens, I'm afraid that no one in Iradia can drive them out. I heard that General Stett had some differences with you and had a very unpleasant argument in the council. Shao whispered. That idiot. Rammel replied nonchalantly. Stett believes that the initial landing cannot be stopped. If there's a need to build a defensive line, it should be outside the range of Blackwing's ships. Otherwise, our troops will be suppressed to the point of being unable to move. Stett's plan is to withdraw the troops from the beach and wait for the monsters to land before launching an attack. His reasoning is that Blackwing has just landed and will inevitably be careless. Without a complete supply line, they are at their weakest right now. Do you think so too, Shao? I don't dare to guess what the generals are thinking, the assistant said. But I do know that the Blackwing Empire's naval fleet is advanced and powerful. If we want to hide outside the range of their cannons, we have to set up a defensive line inland. The old general smiled. His smile was gentle, but it was filled with undisguised mockery. That's why the outcome of the war will be decided on these beaches. The South Coast Army isn't the Daybreak Army. Once the monsters establish a foothold and construct a teleportation circle, the end of the South Coast will come. We only have one chance to stop the enemy, and that is when they're still in the water and trying to land. The main defensive line is here. Rammel pointed his sword at his feet, his voice like a heavy hammer forging steel. All of our forces must be deployed by the beach. Believe me, Shao, the first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive. Whether it is for us or Blackwing, that day will be the most crucial day. Chapter 610. In a rain-drenched jungle dozens of kilometers away from the Northern Kingdom, Garen Nephidisius Tangerine was sprawled on the ground without a care for his image. He stared blankly at a cluster of shrubs that trembled in the wind. Mud splashed high under the torrential rain, covering his grayish-black scales. As the younger brother of the Black Emperor, Prince Poisonfire could, of course, find a more comfortable place to stay in that magnificent and huge palace. However, Garen decided not to do so. He returned to his birthplace, hoping to be as far away from the noise and disturbance as possible, so that he could think about when to make that important decision. 20 days ago, in the Northern Kingdom's Lord's Council, the Black Emperor precisely explained Garen's mission in one sentence. You have to enter Scottsdale, take action with the fleet and the Deep Sea Nation, and directly attack the heart of the Rising Sun City. The strategy and goal of this attack were all included in a simple sentence. However, to the entire Blackwing Empire, this was not just a simple military operation. It was a great feat that was no different from opening up a new continent. Garen was very clear that not only did he have to let the Blackwing clan land on the beach, he also had to open up a second battlefield, completely severing that gigantic empire. However, to do all this, he had to ensure that the landing was successful. If it failed, the entire war would be affected. If he wanted to completely defeat the Rising Sun City, he would have to drag on for many years. Currently, Garen was commanding close to 2 million soldiers, most of which were from the Blackwing clan. There were about 700,000 Manticores, radiation dragons, goblins, and the Blackwing fleet. There were also 1 million undead army, 200,000 deep-sea warriors provided by the demonic fish, and 30,000 northern pirates that had always been controlled by the Blackwing Empire. In the history of the Iradia continent, there were not many people who had commanded an army of such a scale. Caesar did not give him much pressure, but Garen understood the heavy responsibility on his shoulders. In order to prepare for this important landing, he had to go all out. He spent almost the entire day and night here thinking, repeatedly calculating and deducing, and coming up with a complete and detailed plan for every problem, such as investigation and exploration plans, the specific time and place of landing, emergency plans in case of accidents, and so on. The scale of the gathering operation was unprecedented. Garen had not decided on the specific date of the attack, but an unprecedented number of troops and equipment had begun to pour into the West Coast. Soon, the port, towns, and nearby villages were filled with Blackwing soldiers. The number greatly exceeded the merchants, mercenaries, and ordinary citizens on the West Coast. The hotels, taverns, arenas, and card stores were quickly filled with Blackwing soldiers. The edges of towns and nests also had markets. The West Coast wilderness near the inland had become a hidden arsenal. Gunpowder as tall as mountains was hidden in the forest, and rows of Blackwing heavy cannons, anti-aircraft cannons, and magic annihilation cannons were placed in the wilderness. Goblins walked in and out of the honeycomb-like food storage center, making noises as they modified their tanks, armored vehicles, and caterpillar vehicles into even more novel forms. Many tanks were equipped with diving functions, allowing them to travel underwater for a short period of time. Some tanks carried bundles of iron plates, which were used to cross huge trenches and tall walls. There were also tanks equipped with huge mechanical arms, which could be extended to the front and hit the ground to trigger traps. In the West Sea, the three main ships of the Blackwing Empire, Empire's Grasp, Breath of the Holy Dragon, and Northern Dawn, were able to reunite, leading their respective full combat groups to form the world's most powerful naval fleet. They were majestically arranged on the surface of the sea, row after row, occupying more than 20 miles of the sea, waiting for orders from Prince Poisonfire. "Do you want to take a walk together?" "Your Excellency, Prince." A familiar voice rang in Garen's ears. The crouching dragon raised his head and saw a valiant gnoll enter his sight. "Phew," Garen exhaled. "It's you, Hog. Actually, you don't have to be so worried. The Great Emperor entrusted this military operation to you. Undoubtedly, he has absolute trust in you," Hog said. "He firmly believes that you will succeed." Garen pulled the corner of his mouth, forcing a smile full of sharp teeth. After a pause, he asked, "During wartime, your work should be quite busy. Is there something you need from me at this time? If it's nothing important, I won't disturb you while you're thinking. The Great Emperor sent me to inform you that there's no need to worry about the tide and weather, because no matter which day you choose to land, the weather and waves on the sea will be most favorable to us." Prince Poisonfire turned his body. He was a standard black dragon. His body was gray, and the skin on his face clung to his bones like a skeleton. His dark green eyes were extremely bright, like two craggy flames. "Looks like Ordoronso has convinced the Queen of the Deep Sea. From now on, Iradia will listen to your orders on the sea and under the sea," Hog said. "But there's also bad news. The shape-shifting monsters reported that the empire on which the sun never sets is building a defense line on the south coast. It looks like the enemy already knows about Blackwing's plan and has made preparations. With such a big movement, it's impossible to hide it. The enemy isn't stupid." Garen was not surprised. "I didn't expect to win with a surprise attack. But with each passing day, they're getting more and more prepared. It's better to land as soon as possible." "Understood." Garen raised his head and looked around. "We're setting off from here again. Hog, do you know where we're standing? It's where Black Shay, Ordoronso, and I were born." Without waiting for the Jackalon to speak, Garen continued. He stared at the deep swamp not far away and whispered, "At that time, we were ambushed and lost our mother's protection. We were confused and ran away, not knowing where to go. The attack you're talking about is the green dragon named Sylvia, right? She's been dead for many years. The Great Emperor broke her neck with his own hands. That's Ordoronso. He's ruthless, vicious, greedy, and terrifyingly powerful. He's always sharpening his claws and teeth. His eyes are burning with an eternal fire. He wants to burn anyone who dares to hurt or obstruct him to ashes." The grayish-brown dragon took a deep breath. "But I'm different. I'm content with the status quo, and I don't have an uncontrollable ambition like him. If I can, I'm not willing to put myself in a dangerous situation. Your Highness, are you unwilling to go? I'm unwilling to go. Garen nodded, but it's still very difficult for me to ask Ordoronso. Besides, I've been under Ordoronso's protection for half of my life. My beloved and children have been blessed by the Blackwing Empire. I know that the blood of the Blackwing clan flows in every inch of this empire. I'm not so cowardly as to refuse to move when he needs me. The black dragon let out a fierce growl and flapped his wings to fly into the sky. Tell Ordoronso that in 3 days, I'll lead an army to land on the rising sun city. If I fail, apologize to him for me and ask him to take care of Black Shay and Boulogne. Chapter 611. Although the landing would take place 3 days later, the attack had already begun a week ago. Private Aaron Schulch of the 5th Brigade of the 3rd Group of the Radiation Dragon Legion was ready. Like every other soldier around him, he painted his face black with charcoal and shaved his hair, leaving only a short line from his forehead to the back of his head. He looked like a weird-looking northern barbarian. Beside him was his equipment: food and wine, a sword, a short axe, a set of light armor, and a communication crystal. Now, the soldiers of the 5th Brigade were waiting for the radiation dragons to land. His friend, Private Jalal, ran out of a gambling stall and shouted to Aaron, "Hey, lend me 2 gold coins." "Why?" Aaron asked. "Gambling when you don't have money. Maybe you'll be crippled before you even get to the battlefield. If they dare to do anything, it'll be as I wish. Hurry up, I'll give you this as a bet." Jalal said as he untied a silver bracelet from his hand and threw it forward. "Okay." Aaron caught it without hesitation and took out money from his pocket. "The last 2 gold coins. Take good care of it. When this operation is over, I'll definitely get it back." Jalal's voice faded away. This guy ran back to the gambling stall. Aaron looked down at the bracelet. It was made of Polvar silver from the New World, and there was a string of fine Villisterian characters engraved on it. He didn't know which veteran had brought it back from an expedition. At that moment, someone shouted, "We should go." Aaron looked up and saw a large number of radiation dragons flapping their wings and landing. He put on his equipment and left the square with the other soldiers. He searched left and right among the radiation dragons and finally climbed onto a strong, mutated wyvern. "Boss." As he spoke, he handed the silver bracelet to the wyvern's mouth. "Can I trouble you with something? If I die, please help me return this to Jalal of the 6th Squad." "I don't need this thing." The wyvern snorted twice and swallowed it. "Thanks." Aaron put the short axe and sword behind him and used the rope on his thigh to buckle the saddle on the back of the radiation dragon. After a while, he held the handle of the saddle. The 5th Brigade set off from the southern reef island controlled by the Deep Sea Nation. One by one, the radiation dragons flapped their wings and rose into the air. They circled in formation, roared, and finally disappeared into the heavy night. An hour later, in the southern part of the empire where the sun never sets, a cluster of sparks hung in the sky in the direction of the coast, and the explosion brought a bright fire. A string of white illumination rose into the sky, illuminating the dark clouds and the earth. Cherbourg, on the southern coast of the rising sun city, was being bombed. Radiation dragons roared and dropped magic bombs and incendiary bombs from the sky. Aaron bent his waist and crouched on the wyvern's back. The southern army of the Sun Never Set Empire reacted very quickly. They had just stepped into this area when they encountered a fierce attack from the anti-aircraft magic cannons. The sky was densely covered with a firepower net made of cannonballs and spells. "The barrier has been breached. Begin the deployment. You have 10 minutes. The commander's calm voice came from the communication crystal. The dragons began to lower their altitude. Thunderstorm and raging fire flew past Aaron's scalp. He was very calm and knew what he had to do. He quickly unbuckled the buckle on his thigh, held the armrest, and slowly changed his body from a sitting position to a squatting position. When the radiation dragon swept across the ground, he jumped. The plan had already begun. Under the order of the Poison Fire Prince, the third group of the Radiation Dragon Legion gathered on Hell Island in the Red Dragon Sea and successively sent 100,000 soldiers to the southern part of the Rising Sun City. These soldiers would be the advanced troops of the landing, shouldering the heavy responsibility of investigating the terrain, obstructing supplies, and blowing up the transmission array. Go, you little bastards. The Dragon Baltan, the commander of the third group and a trusted aide of the Poison Fire Prince, had said to them, "Go and do a big job. Do a lot of damage and cause trouble at all costs. Remember, if you're caught, only death awaits. Let me see which one of you is the most cunning rabbit." The airborne landing was more difficult than they had imagined. Because the attack of the Rising Sun Empire was too fierce, many of the radiation dragons deviated from their tracks while dodging. Among the 3,000 soldiers of the 5 battalions, only a few hundred people landed according to the established goal. Some people jumped into fields, gardens, rivers, and swamps. Some people fell into thorns and trees, and some unlucky people fell directly into the camp of the Rising Sun Army. What happened? The old Ramiel put on his clothes and pushed open the bedroom door. Although the assistant had been deliberately lowering his voice, it still woke him up. "My apologies, Your Excellency." Shaw stood in front of the desk, straightened his back, and said, "I just received a message that Cherbourg was bombed. Dragons crossed the sea and launched an air attack on us, but they have been repelled by the garrison. We did not lose much." Another air attack. Ramiel rubbed his temples, took the strong tea from the assistant, and took a sip. "Shaw, do you still think Blackwings won't land here? It's just a few small-scale air attacks. Who knows, it might be Blackwings' pretense." "I can't be sure," Shaw said honestly. A few small-scale air attacks. Ramiel smiled and beckoned to Shaw. "Come." They looked at the huge map hanging on the wall. St. Malo Castle, Wissun Castle, Howling Strait, Utah River Embankment. Cherbourg. Ramel's commander's staff tapped on the spot where they had been attacked, drawing a meandering arc. "Did you see it clearly? Blackwings' airstrikes encompassed the entire southern coast of the Empire. They know very well which strategic targets are. Why do they always retreat after a single attack and not hit the main targets? You know, they have the strength to do so." "General, I can't guess." Shaw lowered his head in shame. "As you said, the air attacks are indeed just a pretense." Ramiel was not angry. He knew his assistant's level. "They're doing this to send Blackwing soldiers into our territory and disrupt the rear of the coastal garrison." He walked slowly to the door and pulled it open to look outside. It was already midnight. The soldiers of the Surfer Army stood quietly in the shadows of the streets and houses with swords in their hands. There was a torch every 30 steps, extending into the distance in several long and thin lines of fire, crisscrossing the dark city. The flags on the city wall far away were flapping in the wind. The soldiers on horses and griffins shouted and brought the order to the overwatch who was guarding the city. They opened the city gate and began the search for the stowaways. "They'll definitely land." The general gripped his commander's staff and said softly, "The Black Emperor won't leave his invincible fleet to rust in the docks. Based on the current situation, the landing is just around the corner." With that, he turned and left. The battle was imminent, and he needed sufficient sleep to maintain his vigor. Shaw watched Ramiel's back as he left, then looked back at the dark night sky. Who's their commander? If the Black Emperor doesn't come personally, can anyone really take down the walls the general has set up? Chapter 612. Central, Hejian. It was already late into the night. A man wearing the armor of a Northland general stood on the wall of the fortress, looking down from above. The camp below his feet revealed a faint light of fire. The dark forest rose and fell along the mountain range. The night wind was biting cold, pulling the black dragon flag hanging on the steeple and making it flutter. In the silence, the empty space not far from his right seemed to have been lit up. A few wisps of black smoke rose. In the distorted light, a crimson devil pushed open the door of the material world and squeezed into the real world. "I heard that before Caesar became the Black Emperor, he also liked to stand on high places and look down on the land below," the devil said casually. Back then, the great emperor should have had the ambition to rule the world. The general of Blackwing was not surprised by the devil's appearance. He was still looking into the distance. It's so late. What's the matter? We have the results of the investigation you wanted us to investigate. The commander of the army opposite you is Stet. The general turned around. His eyes were a rare dark gold, and his gaze was cold. You're Stet Fellet, one of the three great walls of the empire, along with Leon and Rammel, aren't you? Yes. Although he's as famous as Dawn's Lion and Southern Front's Commander Rammel, he's still very young and is a newly promoted commander. The devil nodded. Few people know that he's also very strong. Well, he's at least a legend. Seems like a strong opponent. The general nodded. How many people does he have? The allied army of Hijien, plus the Griffin Legion and Sun Knights he brought, Stet has more than 400,000 soldiers. The devil said in a joking tone. The Dark Emperor gave the main force of the Empire to his daughter and only left you with a weak army of lizard men. Even if you add in the barbarians you brought with you from Vilost, you only have half of the enemy's numbers. If you really fight, be careful not to be eaten to the bone. The allied army of Hijien is useless no matter how many people they have. They're not enough to scare me. The general sneered. The troublesome ones are the Griffin Legion, Sun Knights, and Stet himself. What do? That's easy. Just give me 10,000 intelligent species souls, and the humans will never be your match. You know, we have many ways to strengthen your army. The demon chuckled. The general of Black Wings did not answer. He turned around and looked into the distance. After a long time, he said in a low voice, if it were Vilost, it wouldn't be difficult to capture 10,000 human slaves. But now I can't do it. The Black Emperor won't even give you 10,000 men? The demon pretended to be surprised, but he soon regained his composure. Well, it seems that this deal is off. Victory or defeat is in your hands. As an ally, I'll give you a few pieces of information for free before I leave. Speak. Odin Tangerine was stopped in Kotor City. She led the Radiation Dragon Army, the Orc Army, the Grey Horse Army, and the armored troops to fight Leon's Dawn Legion and suffered heavy losses. I've seen the report of that battle. It's Balon's fault. The general of Black Wings said calmly, she's narrow-minded and cares too much about the gains and losses of a moment. She's unwilling to sacrifice the Grey Horse Army. If she used them to delay Dawn Legion and waited for the Tusk tanks to arrive, even Dawn Legion would have suffered heavy losses. She's hopelessly stupid. She's just a child. If the daughter of the Black Emperor can't do anything, what's the point of Balone working hard? The demon sighed and said, Prince Poisonfire left for the south to open up the second battlefield that the Black Emperor spoke of. Although his army is large, half of them are skeletons without intelligence. His opponent, on the other hand, is already prepared. Rammel? He's too old. It's said that he even moved his coffin into the church in the southern city. This old thing doesn't have the determination to win and won't be father's match, that the general of Black Wings said calmly. Is that so? I'm afraid even Prince Poisonfire himself doesn't have as much confidence as you. The demon winked. It said that before he left a message asking the Black Emperor to take care of Blakesia and Balone. There's no mention of your name in it. Is that so? Father knows me well. The general nodded in satisfaction. A male dragon should use his own strength to seize everything he wants. I don't want to live under the protection of others. Early on, when I was a young dragon, I left my parents' castle alone and created terror in Vilost. Later, the people of that continent gave me a nice name. They call me Black Death. Black Death, Khan Tangerine. You've finished speaking. I have something to say, too. Khan turned his head and stared at the head of the demon, his eyes burning with a cold fire. Listen, Barkley. My contract with Gracia is an equal transaction. There are no additional terms. If you try to sow discord between my family and me, I'll really kill you. Understood. Barkley smiled and nodded. Suddenly, he looked shocked. Panic and fear appeared on his face at the same time. Lord Khan, I have to go. I'll contact you again. The demon disappeared like smoke. Khan didn't look at it. Instead, he looked up at the sky with a complicated expression. An unprecedentedly huge dark cloud covered the stars and moon. With a muffled sound of rolling thunder, it arrived in the blink of an eye. Caesar descended like a natural disaster. He stepped on the ground until it collapsed. His two claws supported himself on both sides of the mountain. His huge body, which was 150 meters tall, lowered his terrifying head and looked down at the castle standing on the mountainside. Khan trembled. He clenched his right fist and placed it on his chest. He knelt on one knee. The sun and the stars can't escape your shadow. The mountains and rivers are under your feet. I salute you, your majesty. Caesar looked at him coldly, but his mind was not calm. Why? Why did you let that piece of trash go? I could smell that disgusting stench from 10,000 meters away. Catch it. I'll burn it to ashes and then crush it into pieces. Aslier's roars ran through Caesar's mind. It's just a worm. I'm not interested. Caesar said to the flame devil king, I'm here to see this little fellow. Him? Working with a demon? He's just a disgusting worm. Caesar, let's kill him. This little bastard might become a disaster if we leave him alive. Let's kill him to prevent future troubles. We can also go and mess with the devil's nest. Don't you know where that bitch, the lustful queen, is? Quiet down. After scolding Aslier's, the black dragon finally spoke in the real world. Glagia came looking for me a long time ago. I'm not interested in the power of demons. Even if they can keep their contracts strictly, I don't like working with these crafty fellows. Khan was shocked. He knew that what he had done before did not escape the eyes of the Blackwing King. You hid it from Garen and sacrificed 20,000 souls of Vylos slaves to Glagia so that she could awaken the bloodline of your ancient ancestors. The cracks in the Black Emperor's vertical eye were like spider webs. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. I can see that you're very ambitious and brave. Khan pursed his lips in silence. After a while, he said in a low voice, Are you going to kill me? You made a mistake. Kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy, I'll only crush your bones and throw you back to Vylost. Khan felt a chill in his heart, and a sense of desperation welled up in his heart. Kowtowing and begging for mercy was already a great humiliation, and crushing the dragon bone and throwing it back to Vylost had almost crippled him for life. He might as well die. Thinking of this, Khan suddenly raised his head and looked directly at the face that he had to raise his neck to see. His stubborn nature supported him, making him not hesitate to bare his fangs to an existence thousands of times stronger than himself. This black dragon roared and revealed his true form. Because he had awakened the bloodline of his ancestors, his body was different from an ordinary black dragon. Khan's muscles were well-proportioned and strong. His face was no longer craggy, and his fangs were strong and powerful. His front and back limbs did not have the web structure of amphibians. They were purely sharp claws. Khan's body was only 15 meters long. Compared to the Black Emperor, he was as weak as a worm. However, he still raised his neck and took a defensive stance against Caesar. Caesar narrowed his eyes and did not move his body. He only silently emitted a godlike pressure. Khan was quickly knocked down by the unparalleled pressure. He could barely move. His bones, which he thought were strong, broke one after another under the terrifying pressure. Not to mention the bloodline of the ancestors of the Black Dragon. Even a real ancestor of the Black Dragon would have to bow his head in front of the Black Emperor. Aslier's projection jumped into Caesar's head again. You still want to kill him? If that's the case, do it quickly. Don't waste time. No, Caesar denied. Actually, I quite like this little guy. Aslier's, don't you think he looks a lot like me? This is your illegitimate son? The Lord of the Infernal Prison looked surprised. I didn't expect this, Caesar. Didn't you marry that weak fairy? I thought you would be faithful to her until the end of your life. Idiot. I mean personality. Caesar grinned. Now that you mention it, they do look alike. It's just as annoying. Khan Tangerine. He's actually not bad. He has Garen's wisdom, but also my determination and ambition. Caesar nodded to himself. The Tangerine family needs a character like this. He can make Odin feel the pressure of competition. That child is too lazy. Compete with little Odin? You think too much. Little Odin has your bloodline and harvests the faith of the entire empire. What does this worm have? Nothing. The lord of the infernal prison snorted. Don't I have you? Caesar sized up the flame in front of him. What do you mean? Asliers was stunned. Then he roared fiercely. Are you kidding me? I'm the supreme abyss monarch, the king of all flames. What right does this worm have to inherit my great power? What right does he have to inherit my great power? Black Dragon, I'm warning you. This is the last time I'm warning you. Do you want to start a war? You actually want me to leave a mark on this piece of trash. All right, go. Khan endured the intense pain in his body and tried hard to swallow the blood gushing out of his throat. He could clearly feel the terror of the Black Emperor. He could easily kill him with just one look. That feeling of powerlessness almost made him dizzy. Just as Khan was feeling disheartened, he suddenly felt his body relax. The terrifying pressure instantly disappeared. The young Black Dragon raised his head in confusion. The Black Emperor's vertical eye was still cold and bone-piercing. Although you're a piece of trash, the Empire has wasted food to raise you for so many years. If you want to die, you should die on the battlefield. Otherwise, you'll bring shame to the Tangerine family. Caesar said coldly. Liquid-like flames flowed on the edge of his scales and gradually gathered into a terrifying human figure. Asliers, Khan stuttered. No one knew if it was because of the pain in his body or because of the shock in his mind. Asliers strode over. His right arm, formed by flames, turned into a long blade and stabbed into Khan's throat. Kid, you've gotten a great bargain. Even 10 lives won't be enough to repay you. Khan opened his mouth. The huge pillar of fire in his throat made him unable to speak. You stink. Don't interact with demons anymore. Otherwise, I'll really kill you. The engraving of the inheritance ended very quickly. Asliers turned around and left. This terrifying Abyss King exploded again in front of the Black Dragon. He disintegrated into tiny flames and attached to the Black Emperor's scales. Caesar looked at Khan one last time before flapping his wings and leaving the mountain. I know you don't like Odin. I've already given you the seat of power. If you really have the ability, then fight with her. Let's see who will be the king of Iradia in the end. Chapter 613. In the morning light, Scottsdale Beach was shrouded in a hazy mist. Yesterday's rainstorm had already stopped and changed into continuous drizzle, drenching everything. On the beach, there was a spire which was used as a lookout. Below it was densely packed fortifications and buildings. In the deeper part of the beach, there was an open and irregular-shaped field. The crops in the field were actually very difficult to grow because the Empire's coastal troops had fought countless fierce battles with the deep-sea invaders here. Puluo-Du was sitting in the tower overlooking Scottsdale Beach. Since yesterday, he had already stayed here. The whole night had passed. Now he was cold, hungry, and upset. He only wanted to quickly end the routine investigation mission and return to the barracks to drink a cup of hot milk and then have a good sleep. He turned the telescope to the left side, aimed at the dark sea surface, and began to slowly observe the sea level again. The scene in the lens had already repeated thousands of times in his eyes. Similarly, the turbulent and undulating white waves, the slightly shining reef island under the illumination of the morning light, as well as the hazy sea surface. Everything was calm and peaceful. Puluo-Du turned his head and glanced. The hound had already curled up and slept. What movement can there be? He muttered, It's almost time. I should go to sleep. The sky was hazy. Puluo-Du heard the sound of soldiers on guard ascending the tower. He rubbed his dry eyes, picked up the kettle, and poured a mouthful of water into his mouth. The ice-cold temperature made his stomach ache. Puluo-Du hissed and prepared to do one last routine lookout and then immediately leave. Once again, he turned the telescope to the left side and slowly swept his gaze along the sea level to the right. When he turned to the midpoint of the sea level, the telescope suddenly stopped. The scene in the dream made Puluo-Du completely stretch his body and used all his strength to widen his eyes. Through the faintly discernible fragmentary mist, the sea level was filled with ships as if magic. large and small, all kinds of ships. They were moving closely and orderly, as if they had already stayed there for a long time. These ghost-like ships seemed to emerge from the bottom of the sea. Omniscient eyes didn't give any warning to the coastal troops. The Empire's ally, the Deep Sea Kingdom, also didn't transmit any information to the Southern Army. Puluo C stared blankly. He had never received such a big shock in his entire life. So much so that this soldier found it hard to believe. He was speechless, as if a devil from hell was clutching his heart. Fear made him tremble from head to toe. Puluo C jumped up from the stool with a huge movement. Then, lying on the railing, he shouted towards the soldiers who were preparing to change the guard. "There is a ship landing." After shouting, he immediately turned around. He did not care if the soldiers below heard him. He gripped the magic stone on the sentry tower tightly and sent a message to the command center of the coastal forces. "Officer Mary." Puluo C's voice trembled. "This is Scottsdale on the sea. There are at least 10,000 ships. Have you lost your mind?" "Soldiers," the command center refuted. "It's impossible for pirates to have so many ships. The Deep Sea Nation doesn't have that many ships either. No one in the entire Iradia has that many ships." The senior officer's suspicion and scolding made Puluo C sober up from the state of fear. "If you don't believe me, then come and see for yourself." His words were much smoother. Deep Sea Nation scum betrayed the Empire. Those spellcasters are also all trash. We didn't get any information beforehand. The command center was silent for a moment. The receiver seemed to be ordering the person next to him to verify. Then the communication came again. "So many ships. Where are they going?" Puluo C looked at the sea surface. His pupil had already shrunk to the size of a needle. "They are going towards me." There had never been such a dawn. In the hazy, dusky dawn, the formidable Blackwing fleet with a dignified and intimidating aura spread out in the periphery of the 5 beaches of Scottsdale. The sea surface was filled with ships, from the dark beach outside Cherbourg to the mouth of Rapids River. These warships together formed a steel corridor that surrounded Scottsdale. The entire sea surface was filled with the flags of the warships flying in the breeze, producing a crackling sound. In the hazy fog, the towering silhouette of the enormous battleships was like a monster from the deep sea, and the intimidating cruisers and armor destroyers also revealed their silhouettes in the fog. Behind them was the main ship of the great Blackwing Empire. Compared to the ordinary warships, the size of these main ships had been continuously improved to the point of exaggeration. Perhaps it was more appropriate to use sea surface platform to describe them. After that, there were densely packed landing ships and transport ships. The large number of warships that were arranged on the wide sea surface were producing loud noises. They were brimming with the desire to fight. The cranes on both sides of the deck were rotating. The iron chains on the frame were creaking. While swinging, landing ships were being sent out one after another. The landing ships were crowded with skeletal warriors wearing armor. The flying dragons swept across the sea surface at low speed. They shuttled back and forth between the closely packed and orderly warships. Their low roar intimidated these undeads with low intelligence. "Arrange the formation and wait for the order. Arrange the formation and wait for the order. Arrange the formation and wait for the order. Later, let the undeads charge first." Garen stared at the tranquil beach in the distance. Under the records of a few draconians, he gave orders one by one. "Then, let the deep-sea warriors cover and escort the gnome engineers up. Clear the underwater obstacles and spell traps." After the gnome engineers begin their work, the landing ships must send the tanks to the shore and prepare to fire from the depths of the land. After 30 minutes of clearing the obstacles, the main forces of each region will be divided into 10 batches. They will begin their landing operations at 5-minute intervals. Be wary of the enemy's counterattack. Once the attack begins, we must firmly occupy the beach. We cannot relax for even a moment. First, let's cover the area with fire. Prince Poison Fire waved his claws, signaling the beginning of this historic battle. Strong sound waves rolled back and forth on the Scottsdale coast. The hazy fog was torn apart by the cannons, and the entire attacking area erupted with a roaring storm of artillery fire. The fleet had long been ready for battle. Once the order was given, all the armored warships did not hesitate to shoot at the predetermined target. Black clouds began to rise into the sky from the beach area. The cruisers roared and struck the bunkers and underwater bunkers of the Rising Sun City garrison. The battleships Tusk and Thorn destroyed an exposed counterattack group with astonishing precision. The main ship, Empire's Grasp, fired 600 shells at once, all hitting the spell positions on the reef beach. Under the cover of the artillery fire, the small destroyers began to move forward. They increased their horsepower and approached a point only 1 kilometer away from the shore. They lined up in a row and poured concentrated fire on all the targets on the defensive position system on the shore. The plan was carried out seamlessly. 10 minutes after the Sea Fleet carried out a saturation attack, another sound rumbled over the fleet. At first, the sound was very slow, like a huge dragon flapping its wings. Then the sound gradually increased and became the sound of flapping wings one after another. The Radiation Dragon Legion appeared. They passed directly over the heads of the huge fleet. Their heads were attached to their tails, and their wings were attached to their wings. They were of different colors and sizes. There were about 20,000 of them in total. The dragons ignored the fleet's artillery rain and threw incendiary bombs at the beaches and straits that tried to fight back. This terrible weapon, specially made by the Empire, weighed about 300 kilograms. It was now equipped with the Radiation Dragon Legion in batches. After coming into contact with the object, it would quickly erupt with a temperature more terrible than the dragon's breath. It also had strong adhesion and could last for 5 to 10 minutes. Its destructive effect on combustible objects was stronger than that of the explosive bombs fired by the Blackwing fleet. Scottsdale had been reduced to a sea of fire that constantly emitted black smoke. The flames burned on the water, making the scene look like hell. Chapter 614. The soldier in the silver flower armor was in a hurry. He did not care about etiquette and rushed into the command center of the Southern Army. "Commander, something has happened." "What?" Commander Rammel frowned. Before he could get up, his assistant stood up. The soldier's face was covered in sweat as he shouted hoarsely. Dark Bank, Rapids Embankment, and Uri Beach were attacked at the same time. The entire Scottsdale is under attack. The sentries saw Blackwing's ships. They said there are 10,000 of them. Shaw took a step back in shock, shivering from the cold wind. Although Rammel was certain that the Blackwing Empire would attack the south coast, he was still caught off guard when the attack began. "Don't panic." Mail did not move an inch and remained seated in his chair, only frowning. "Call the spellcasters over. I want to investigate the Omniscient Eye." The Omniscient Eye was a magical product of the Unsetting Empire and the Blackwing Empire during the Cold War between the North and the South. In order to fight against the Blackwing Empire's expanding maritime hegemony, the late Great Wizard Ron Sully proposed the Omniscient Eye plan. With the Unsetting Empire's territorial waters as the foundation, a large number of interconnected scouts and guards were set up. Furthermore, the scouts and guards were constantly expanding outward to achieve the effect of monitoring the entire sea. At the time, the Blackwing Empire had even launched the Steel Cemetery Project as a countermeasure. The black-robed spellcaster arrived quickly. He held a map in his left hand and 2 sorcerer's stones in the other. Panting, he pushed the door open. "Scottsdale is under attack. Blackwing's fleet is here." Rammel looked up at him. "Why didn't the Omniscient Eye give us a warning?" The spellcaster opened the sorcerer's stone and spread out the map. "My apologies, General. The Omniscient Eye only discovered Blackwing's fleet 10 minutes ago. Before that, we didn't detect any movement of the enemy." "Did the spellcasters outside fail?" "No." The spellcasters checked all the spellcasters. They were normal. They weren't deceived. "You mean to say that the huge fleet appeared out of thin air?" Shaw stared at the spellcaster who was trying to shift the blame. "Is that possible?" Rammel stopped the intimidating assistant. "The fleet didn't appear out of thin air. It might have emerged from the bottom of the sea." The spellcaster's eyes lit up as he grabbed his savior. "Commander, what do you mean?" "The Emperor is right. The Oceanids have already betrayed the Alliance and handed over their most precious underwater passage to the Blackwing Empire to escort the fleet into Scottsdale." Rammel's gaze turned cold. Since the attack has begun, it won't stop. His assistant's face turned pale when he heard this. He stood there quietly and hissed, "The hidden dangers left behind by the previous air raids. The enemy has already revealed their target. Now, all we need to do is to guard the teleportation circle and supply line behind Skylar." Rymel did not particularly mind, and waved his hand to signal for his attendant to help him put on his armor. Although he was old, his mind was clear. He turned to the spellcasters who were watching the battle from behind and asked calmly, "What's the situation now?" "The bombardment has come to an end for now, but the Blackwing fleet outside the various regions are controlling the dead. They have gathered a large undead army, and it seems that they are about to land." "What about the losses of the coastal forces?" "The soldiers hiding in the underground bunkers are mostly unharmed. On the ground, we lost 7 fortress groups and 3 magic cannon bases. The loss at Uli Beach was the greatest. All the normal ballistas and stone cannons were destroyed. None of the archers and soldiers in the 9 short fortresses survived. The kind of fire magic that can burn continuously is very scary." Lamar closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Then he quickly ordered, "Notify the command center to forbid the activation of magical traps. Forbid the use of swords and magic cannons against the undead. Release AoE forbidden spell scrolls when they approach the water. Inform the entire Southern Army. Aside from the Howling Straits, all garrisons are to do a head count and transfer half of them to Scottsdale. Have the knights gather at the teleportation portal. I'm going to the front lines now." Fierce winds surged from the sea in the south, blowing away the hazy mist and causing the fire to spread even more fiercely. The surface of the sea was dyed crimson. The undead had already begun to disembark. Under the protection of the knights, Rammel ascended the tower. Looking down from above, the shallow waters of the Uri Shoal seemed to be covered in white ants. As these ants crawled forward, the tide also rose and fell as if it was cheering. The skeletal dragon flapped its skeletal wings and roared behind them. The soul fire in its head could be seen from far away. "What a huge skeletal dragon!" Shaw exclaimed. "The war in the north is endless. There is no taboo against using necromancy. It's not rare for powerful undead leaders to emerge." Rammel pursed his lips. "But that skeletal dragon is special. It's the lord of the Blackwing Empire, the ruler of the undead, the skeletal dragon Angramo. The lord of the Blackwing Empire. It's the commander of this landing operation?" "Not necessarily." Rammel shook his head. "Even the lords of the Imperial Court have different levels of power. Angramo's power has yet to break through the legendary realm, and it has not shown any extraordinary intelligence. It's not qualified to command such a large-scale military operation." "Then who's their commander?" "The commander of the central battlefield is Odin Tangerine, the daughter of the Black Emperor. Given the importance of this war, the commander's rank won't be much lower than Odin's." Rammel pondered for a moment. "It should be either the Jackal King or the Poison Fire Prince. I'm more inclined to the Poison Fire Prince. The Jackal King is in charge of the Blackwing Empire's internal affairs and human affairs. He hasn't been involved in military affairs for many years." "Sir, they've come ashore," Shaw suddenly said. There was no need for his reminder. The Uri Beach Command Center reacted even faster. When the first skeletons stepped onto land, they immediately released a large-scale forbidden spell scroll, determined to let the Blackwing soldiers have a taste of their own medicine. Terrifying flames engulfed the entire shallow waters. The undead howled and turned into charcoal, their soul fire scattering. "Sir, you said that the first 24 hours are the most critical." A smile appeared on Shaw's lips. "But the enemy actually used these cannon fodders to test the waters instead of charging fiercely. When our reinforcements arrive, they won't be able to fight their way in. They won't wait that long. Rammel's expression was serious as he stared at the white ants surging out of the shallow waters. They're exhausting the garrison's spells. Once the scrolls are exhausted, the garrison will have no choice but to expose the underwater traps and artillery positions. At that time, we'll receive the fiercest attack. Landing will only take a moment. Understood. It'll take some time for the reinforcements to arrive. I'll go and get the forbidden spell scrolls of the various garrisons first, Shaw immediately said. Okay, Rammel nodded. Even so, the number of forbidden spell scrolls was limited. If they wanted to completely solve the problem, they would have to overturn the Blackwing warships parked near the sea, or the commander of the Rising Sun City looked at the roaring corpse dragon hiding in the safe zone, controlling the undead army, and made a decision. Kill it. Chapter 615. Caesar. Asliers woke him up from his contemplation. You don't seem to be very concerned about this battle. Black Dragon, who was lying on the ground and wagging his tail, froze for a moment. He raised his head and stared at the looming flame in front of him. What do you mean? Look at your careless appearance. The flame condensed, and Asliers appeared with a huge skull. Little Odin encountered obstacles and was suppressed by the Dawn Legion. Scottsdale's situation is not optimistic. You are not going to make a move? It seems that you know everything. Black Dragon did not answer. Instead, he looked at him with a smile and bared his fangs. You are a bit strange as a demon lord. It seems that you want me to flatten the Rising Sun City, but after Iradia unified it, the Blackwing's spearhead will be aimed at the bottomless abyss. Well, so what? Flames gushed out of the king of Flame Devil's mouth. I have been here for so many years and have been recognized by Iradia. It will only take a moment to break through the boundary wall and go to the Star World. You will deal with the abyss in the future. What does it have to do with me, Asliers? So you are free? Black Dragon's face did not change. Asliers laughed a few times. Anyway, the three pillar gods can't control me now. They can't even protect themselves. Of course, they don't have time to trouble you. Caesar nodded and asked straightforwardly, what are your plans next? Do you want to cooperate with me? In fact, he and the Lord of the Infernal Prison had been colluding for many years. Except for that time, when Odin went to the Black Rock Mountain alone, the two sides had been getting along very well. There was no friction, but the previous cooperation was in the name of a transaction. This was the first time that Caesar had formally invited him. With your current strength, it is not difficult to deal with a Rising Sun City. Why do you need to form an alliance? Is it not difficult? I don't think the Rising Sun City is weak. They have suppressed the Blackwing's army from the beginning, and these human beings have the backing of the gods, so their advantage has not been obvious. In addition, until now, I haven't figured out what the Rising Sun City is going to use to deal with me, so I've been biding my time. I don't believe. Caesar suddenly cut off his words and felt that he was a little long-winded and stretched his claws to pick his teeth. With your brain, it's useless to tell you. To form an alliance, not marriage. Why do you need to know so much? If there is danger, just run. The essence of cooperation is the exchange of benefits, and you can't take out anything that's attractive to me, yet you still dare to speak to me in such a tone. Black Dragon, is this the attitude you use when asking for the help of an Upper Realm monarch? Asliers roared, you're just wasting my time. Well, so do you have any plans to cooperate? Caesar glanced at it and continued picking his teeth. If you have any problems in the future, I'll help you too. These guys dare to stick their hands into the Tangerine family. I want to deal with them, but not now. The Black Dragon said. Of course, he could not completely follow the other party's train of thought. He had his own ideas. Currently, Blackwings is at war with the Rising Sun City. It is not good to provoke the devils. Once the war is over, I'll take you out to have some fun. We'll kill Glagia you've been thinking about all this time. Glagia? You remember her name very clearly. I think it is you who has been longing for her. Asliers snorted and approached Caesar, bursting into countless small flames that attached to his body. Let's go. I agreed to cooperate with you. Let's do it now. Let us take the Rising Sun City. and burn it to ashes. It was very difficult to keep an eye on the Dark Emperor, but it was very easy to find out his whereabouts. Caesar was the largest dragon in the history of Eladia, and he was not willing to hide his whereabouts. Wherever he went, he would bring with him the power of mountains and tsunamis. When he left the borders of the Blackwing Empire, information about him flew into the capital of the empire, where the sun never sets. The news did not reach Emperor Enrique immediately. Instead, it reached the Holy Sun Temple and reached the hands of someone who had been waiting for a long time. Dawn had just broken when the priest in a golden robe walked over quickly and handed over the specific information about the Dark Emperor. The person who was waiting for it opened the itinerary under the sunlight and looked at it twice to confirm this fact. The Black Emperor has already left his country and is heading southeast. With his speed, he will reach the central city in less than half a day. It seems that the suppression of the Daybreak Army is working. He can't wait to help his daughter. The archbishop in golden robes muttered to himself, his face expressionless. "Are you concentrating, Archbishop?" "Archbishop." The priest could not hold back the excitement in his heart. "Of course, if we delay any longer, the Black Emperor will probably destroy the Daybreak Army and the Radiant Moon Circle. We have prepared for 30 years and will not make mistakes at this time. The bishops have already ignited the fire of the sun. Lord Notorious is also ready. I will go get the divine casket now." "No." The archbishop stood up. "I will go get it myself." It was the year 1742 of the Third Era of Iradia. The war between Blackwing and the Rising Sun City was in full swing. The Black Emperor Caesar Ordoronzo Tangerine finally could not hold back his arrogant ambition. He was determined to personally take the field and destroy all obstacles in front of him. In order to kill the insufferably arrogant Black Dragon, the Rising Sun City touched the taboo of the gods with the tacit approval and push of the sun god Pyro. The fire of the sun burned fiercely. Countless obscure lines crisscrossed on the ground. The bishops in golden robes stood under the altar and chanted hymns in unison. Behind them, numerous priests knelt, spreading out for nearly 100 meters. Notorious Pain, the chosen one, walked out from the back. He was naked, without a single strand of hair on his body. His eyes were shrouded in golden light, as if he was blind. Under the guidance of the archbishop, he slowly ascended the altar. "Your body will be baptized. Your heart and soul will be enlightened by the sun," Notorious heard the archbishop say to him. He had heard this sentence tens of thousands of times in the past 30 years. "Praise the sun." He nodded. "Praise the sun," the archbishop shouted. In the midst of the prayers of the priests, he knelt down with the box in his hands. The long box was placed horizontally on his knees. He raised his head and said, "Lord God, your servant longs for your light to eliminate all darkness and evil. Concentrate your power and will, never to be extinguished, never to be extinguished." As his voice fell, the cloudless sky suddenly seemed to be torn open. A pillar of white flame spurted out of the gap and shot directly at Notorious. The chosen one pursed his lips tightly, his expression painful. His skin and flesh evaporated in the incomparable flame. "Raise the fire high and ascend to the top to become a god." The archbishop opened the long box, only to find that there was a lively fire inside. The fire, which should not have appeared in the material plane, suddenly crawled into Notorious's body under the guidance of the scorching sunlight, stabilizing his originally blurred and twisted torso. "Notorious, my child, my most devout believer and servant, from now on, you will leave my arms and become a god walking in the human world." Pyro drew a delicate divinity in Notorious's body. His mighty voice echoed in the holy temple of the sun. "May you always be the light that resists the darkness and the fire that repels evil. May you never forget your heart and live up to your mission." "Praise the sun." The archbishop bowed to the ground. The mid-level divine power, the god of light and fire, Notorious Bane. Chapter 616. Hujian, Bloody Plains. Lead-colored clouds floated in the sky, and thorns grew on the bloody plains. On the distant horizon, a majestic fortress stood. Monsters occupied the flat valley. Khan stood on a low slope and looked into the distance. Ahead is the city of Morges, the northern pass of the Hajin kingdom and the largest fortress in the east. Soon, it will be yours, master. What did you call me? Master. Under Emperor Caesar Ordoronzo Tangerine. Who else can be our master other than the Black Death god Khan Tangerine? If this was the Empire, you would be hanged. Don't tell me you don't know Odin, Wallace. Warren. Khan examined the werewolf in front of him. Of course I do. She's the Emperor's daughter and the only successor of the Blackwing Empire. She ruled the North for 50 years when the Emperor was asleep. If that's the case, why didn't the kingdom of Wolfheart go to the central region? Why did they cross the great swamp to find me? You have to know that Odin is currently being troubled by the Daybreak army. Even a little bit of help will make him remember you guys. Khan narrowed his eyes. Who gave you the order? No one gave us the order. The Emperor only asked us to participate in the war, but he didn't say how. The kingdom of Wolfheart is willing to be your vassal and help you win and take over Hajin Kingdom. Why me and not Odin? His Highness Odin has ruled the North for 50 years, and he has always been patient. The regular army of the Central Region, under the name of slave catchers, has repeatedly harassed the border of the kingdom of Wolfheart. We sharpened our weapons until they were shiny, but we were ordered not to attack. We could only watch our living space being compressed, and we had to give up our land, hunting grounds, and water. Wallace said in a low voice, "To be honest, the kingdom of Wolfheart is very disappointed in His Highness Odin." Khan turned his head and looked at this guy coldly. The color of his eyes was strange. There was a blood-red color in the dark gold, and it didn't look like the eyes of an ordinary dragon. "Tell me, what do you want from me?" "We don't want anything. But if we are attacked, we will bite off a piece of meat from the enemy." This is the survival of the Foxwolf tribe. The Foxwolf tribe is a vassal of the Blackwing Empire. We are willing to give everything to the Black Emperor. We only hope that this bit of dignity won't be taken away. Wallace was not afraid of this terrifying gaze. Instead, he raised his head and looked at Khan. As a member of the new generation of the Tangerine family, he was completely different from the exquisite and beautiful Odin and Bulonia. His entire face was shrouded in thick hair, and his skin was not smooth. It was pale like a dead man, and his surface was covered with wrinkles after healing wounds. And this was only his human form. Only the heavens knew how many scars he had on his dragon body. "I already understand what you mean." Khan was silent. In fact, he was also very dissatisfied with the Blackwing Empire's 50 years of concession, but the real maker of this policy was his father, the Poison Fire Prince. Khan could not make more comments. "I promise you in my own name to give the Foxwolf tribe dignity. If we march at full speed, we will be able to reach the city in half a day. The Foxwolf tribe is willing to be the vanguard and climb the walls of Morges." "No need, let's go at this speed. Stet knows that my troops have doubled, but the troops of the Rising Sun City are all on the central and southern lines. No one will help him. Let those fragile humans curl up in the castle in fear." I can already imagine them desperately sharpening their swords, feeding their horses and griffins, and nervously setting up traps. They can only watch as we push forward. With each passing day, the monster gets closer to them, and the anxiety in their hearts increases. This kind of torture will turn them into fragile strings that can be snapped with a gentle tug. The Foxwolf tribe heard this and exclaimed, "This is the wisdom of a dragon. It has nothing to do with wisdom. This is a personal experience. I once secretly sold the souls of slaves to the devil in order to become more powerful. No one knew about this at the time, but it still made me rack my brains and tremble in fear. I was afraid that any news would reach the ears of the great emperor, so I couldn't sleep every night. But later, when the secret was really exposed, I was not afraid because no matter what, the worst that could happen was death. Only then did I know how ridiculous my previous worries, nervousness, and fear were. I even made more mistakes because of it." Khan sighed. "A great disaster is not terrible, but a great disaster is terrible." At this time, looking back from the low slope where they were standing, there was a flat valley below. Thousands of camps were stationed there. Battle lizards, foxwolves, and barbarians formed their own armies. At the edge of the camp, there were wooden stakes next to the bonfires, and the corpses of human scouts were hung high on the stakes. Night. Stet stood on the city walls of Moor, standing in the wind, holding his longsword blessed by God and looking into the distance. He was surrounded by a dozen or so guards. These guards were all elite Griffin knights. They looked like ordinary soldiers, but they had eyes as sharp as griffins, and their strength was similar to that of adult griffins. Dozens of pairs of eyes were all locked in the same direction. There, the black dragon arrogantly spread its wings and let out a majestic roar under the moonlight. Stet had never seen the dragon before, but he knew its name. It was the Black Emperor's nephew, Khan Tangerine. It was said that he had left his parents' wings when he was young and fought in the land of Vilost. He was as smart as his father and knew how to use tricks to confuse people. At the same time, he was also as cruel and fierce as the Black Emperor. If he was angered, he would use his big mouth to swallow people alive. Khan was also staring at the bonfire on the walls of the fortress. As he looked, he suddenly laughed silently, revealing his ferocious teeth. The black dragon flapped its wings and approached more alone. It spat out a column of fire from its mouth. The stream of fire swept across the walls, illuminating the bricks behind the magic barrier. The 9th day, the Griffin Knight whispered. Yes, very punctual, Stet said calmly. This was the 9th day of Khan's army's formation outside Moor Fortress. Every night, after nightfall, the Black Death would approach and disturb the magic barrier of the fortress. Other than that, there was no other movement. They did not use ankegs to open up a path, nor did they use bombs or spells. They did not attack either. What were these guys waiting for? The Griffin Knight murmured. Khan Targaryen showed great patience, but his companions were not so good-tempered. The griffins in Morg City twisted their bodies uneasily under the awe of the dragon's might. They let out low growls and arched their backs in a lunging posture, waiting for news from the other battlefields. Stet turned around and threw a meaningful glance at the fortress headquarters. The composition of the alliance was complicated. It was mainly made up of the Griffin army and the Sun Knights that he brought with him, as well as the Northern Expeditionary Army of the various countries in Hejin County. These armies each had their own leaders and interests, and their combat power was also different. There were elite troops that could slay dragons, mixed troops that only knew how to capture slaves, and many mercenaries from all over Hejin County. It was not easy to get such a mixed army to follow orders and cooperate in battle. It was even more difficult to maintain the same ideology. The dragon obviously knew the problem that Stet was facing. It was not in a hurry to attack at all. Instead, it was pressuring the alliance to make mistakes. Stet could barely maintain the situation now. But if there was news from the other battlefield that was unfavorable to the Empire, the morale of the soldiers in Moor Fortress would be immediately shaken. The possibility of the alliance disintegrating from the inside was very high. Time is not on my side, Stet thought. Chapter 6:17. A fire was blazing in the hearth, and on the table were savory mutton legs and pies. Serving girls brought in plates of bacon, milk, and fresh fruit. Stetfellet sat at the head of the stone table and called the generals of the allied army to a council. The generals of the Norton Kingdom, the Bylan Kingdom, and the Tanima Principality had all arrived. A few decades ago, these three countries did not have much influence in Hejin County. At that time, the overlords of Hejin County were still the Sazar Kingdom and the Yuan Kingdom. These two countries had about 30% of Hejin County's population, but they occupied more than half of the land and wealth. However, their kings suddenly went crazy and joined forces to break away from the control of the Rising Sun City and pursue complete independence. In the end, this angered Emperor Enrithyr and made the human kings hate him. Thus, the Sazar Kingdom and the Yuan Kingdom continued to weaken under continuous oppression. Their population, land, and wealth were all taken over by the other countries in Hejin County. In the end, the three new countries emerged. The generals of Hejin County rarely gathered together because they were all important figures in their respective countries. They were not willing to bow down to the young Stead, and the commander of the alliance rarely looked for them. However, today was different. This was the 9th day that the Khan army had been stationed outside Fort Morgue. The generals had been discussing this for a long time. They could not wait any longer and wanted Stead to quickly gather them for a meeting. They wanted to know what to do. I'm sure you all know the reason why I've gathered everyone here today. Stead drank a cup of hot milk and looked around. The Khan army is already in front of us. They're stationed 50 miles away from Fort Morgue. 50 miles is the distance for those monsters to charge. In other words, as long as they start charging, they can immediately reach the gate of Fort Morgue. The crowd was quiet. The generals exchanged glances and did not say anything. Only the sound of Stead's griffin tearing into its food could be heard. It was the Griffin King. Its size was similar to a young dragon, and it could eat 2 cows in one meal. Well, I know that many of your men have died. Have you found out? Tell me about the situation over there. How many people are in the Khan army? How many spellcasters? How many dragons? Stead looked at the scout commander. The great wizard has used detection, and the scouts have also taken a closer look. There are a total of 50,000 barbarians, 150,000 battle lizard men, and 100,000 newly arrived foxwolfmen. They are not the main force of the Blackwing Empire, and they are wearing old weapons and armor. There are no heavy firearms or armored vehicles. The scout commander said slowly, "As for the number of spellcasters, we can't be certain. Perhaps there are some among the 100,000 foxes, but definitely not many. As for dragons, the only one I have seen so far is Khan Tangerine. I heard that Caesar has escaped from the Blackwing Empire and is currently in the Sicily Mountains. However, your scouts have yet to see the Black Emperor with their own eyes, right?" Stead asked again. The scout commander nodded. They have not seen the Black Emperor, nor have they seen any dragons that are more than 30 meters long. These words reassured the generals present. Not long ago, there was a rumor that the Black Emperor had personally come to Hujin County. This made everyone panic. If Caesar Tangerine had really appeared here, then there was no need to fight this battle. Hujin County might have already fallen and been trampled into ruins before the Empire could even react. Stead also nodded slightly. If we only have to deal with Khan's ragtag army, then this battle will be much easier. The general of the Norton Kingdom slammed his fist on the table to attract the attention of the others. "Commander, the monsters outside have not moved for 9 days. It's obvious that they are waiting for something. Now that we have the advantage in numbers, why don't we take the initiative to attack and catch them off guard and eliminate the threat outside Hujin County?" Well said, but our opponents are all monsters that are not afraid of death. If we fight them head-on, we will suffer great losses, said a hoarse voice. A hoarse voice jumped out. The leader of the Tanima Duchy was a spellcaster. Who will be fighting the first battle? The infantry of the Norton Kingdom? The general of the Norton Kingdom glared at him, but before he could say anything, attacking rashly is suicide, said another general. The Khan army does not have dragons or spellcasters. They also do not have good armor or weapons. However, the foxwolfmen and battle lizardmen are all bloodthirsty beasts. They will go crazy when they see meat. No matter how badly injured they are, they will not retreat. Some of the battle lizardmen will even bite you when they are beheaded. Someone nodded. They will eat humans and their own kind. This means that when the battle begins, the Khan army will not be troubled by the casualties and will not have to worry about food supplies. A direct battle is the result that the monsters want. The general of the Norton Kingdom immediately stood up and said, "Then we'll do as you say. We'll wait here. It's better to wait than to die. That's right. If you want to go, then go with your soldiers." In the midst of the chaos, Stead's laughter was particularly piercing. The leaders who were arguing with each other immediately quieted down. He said sarcastically, "When hunters are hunting, do you think they will rush to fight the beasts with swords? Everyone, remember your identity and think carefully. Between us and the monsters outside, who is the hunter and who is the prey?" The general of the Norton Kingdom is right. The monsters are waiting, so we should take the initiative to attack. However, since we're taking the initiative to attack, we should be the ones to decide how to fight this battle. Stet pointed at his head. The monsters have sharp teeth and claws, but their brains are not that good. They can't control their thirst for blood. Well, bring the map. The plates were quickly removed, and a map of the surrounding terrain of the fortress was spread out on the stone table. Now, as the count of the empire on which the sun never sets and the commander-in-chief of the Hejin army, I order all troops to prepare. Stet stood up and looked around. His finger lightly tapped on a spot on the map. The Mawson River is 12 miles northwest of Fort Morgue. This river originates from the Sicilico Mountains and flows south past the fortress. This will be the battlefield between us and Khan's army. Tomorrow evening, General Jory of the Bailan Kingdom will be the bait. He will lead the cavalry and the Sun Knights to launch a surprise attack on the monster camp. Be careful not to get entangled and retreat immediately. Those monsters have 2 legs, so the cavalry can easily tie them up and retreat as they fight. We will lure them to the east bank of the Mawson River. Jory hesitated. This was not an easy task. If he was not careful, he would lose his life. Stet looked up at him, his gaze as sharp as a sword. Can't you do it? Yes, I can. Good. The infantry of the Norton Kingdom and the soldiers of the South Kingdom will set up an ambush and hide at the mouth of the Mawson River. They will support the cavalry and ambush the pursuing monsters. Understood. Understood. Okay. Stet's finger moved down. On the other hand, when the Khan's army is chasing the cavalry, the spellcasters of the Tanima Duchy will concentrate their power and solidify the water downstream of the Mawson River into ice. The Griffin Legion and the rest of the Allied army will quickly cross the river from here. When the Khan's army is fighting on the east bank of the Mawson River, our other main force has already circled around to its back. Stet explained the battle plan and orders in one breath. He looked around coldly and said, "If we can't win with a pincer attack from the front and back, I suspect that I'm commanding a group of farmers instead of well-trained professional soldiers." The generals of the Hejin army looked at each other and remained silent for a while. When they came back to their senses, Stet had already left, leaving behind a thin figure. Lord Stet. Stet's most trusted guard followed behind him. You climb the wall every night not to see the dragon, but to look towards the northwest, am I right? You have already planned to fight at the Mawson River. That's right. The young commander nodded and exhaled. However, this battle is not that simple. The enemy is a dragon with the surname Tangerine. These 4 words have almost become the nightmare of the Iradia continent. To be honest, I have no confidence in those cowards in the Hejin army. I can only improvise. He patted the guard's shoulder and walked away without looking back. Chapter 618. The commander of the Allied army, Stet Fellet, looked into the distance. In his vision, General Joly was leading 20,000 Byron cavalry out of the city. Although 20,000 soldiers did not seem like a lot in front of the majestic fortress of Fort Moore, it was all that the kingdom of Byron could provide. Behind Schneider, under the city wall, 8,000 Sun Knights were silently waiting for orders. Each of them was wearing a steel armor engraved with a coat of arms, and a double-edged longsword that was as tall as a person was slung diagonally on the saddle. Those carefully selected southern horses seemed to have realized that war was coming, and their iron hooves slowly but firmly dug the ground. A guard quickly climbed up the city walls and reported, "Commander, the Byron cavalry has all left the city." "I saw it," Stet said calmly. "What about the Norton infantry, Sot's crossbowmen, Tanima's spellcasters, and the armies of the other smaller kingdoms?" The armies of the Norton and South kingdoms arrived at the Mawson River last night and have already set up an ambush. The spellcasters have already gathered and can freeze the river's surface at any time. The other kingdom's armies are also preparing to leave the city through the side gates. Another guard came up to him and reported, "Commander, Captain Budden has sent word that they have encountered a total of 7 groups of lizardmen scouts. However, they have all been dealt with. Those monsters will never be able to return to report to their masters." Stet nodded. Long before the Byron cavalry set out, he had already sent out 2,000 of them. They were all veterans and spellcasters who had experienced hundreds of battles. He had ordered them to cover the tracks of the cavalry and carry out reconnaissance missions at the same time. Captain Button's report was just enough to ease his worries. "Tell General Rio that my Solar Knights are about to set out. When the Byron cavalry is pursued by Khan's army, the Solar Knights will attack the flanks of the monsters and buy them time. Tell him not to worry," Stet said to the guards. Then he looked back at the city below. Feeling the gaze of the commander, the 8,000 Sun Knights pulled out their sword from their saddles and raised them to the sky. The tips of their swords flashed with cold light, forming a grim forest of blades. In front of such an army, it seemed that even dragons would be torn into pieces like paper. Stet raised his hand and said, "Praise the sun! Praise the sun!" The roar was like thunder. This was a branch of the Sicilian mountains. The vast green mountains surrounded the flat valley. Khan's clan legion had been stationed here for 11 days. Except for Khan Tangerine, no one knew his real battle plan. At that moment, the Black Death God had already returned to his true form. He was sleeping in a temporary nest. His appearance was that of a black dragon that was 16 meters long. He was much stronger than an ordinary black dragon like Iradia. His body was covered in burned scars, and his membranous wings were tattered. He looked extremely weak, but he also looked ferocious and terrifying. Khan opened his eyes, and the surging flames in his pupils disappeared. He stood up and said, "The worms finally can't wait any longer. Prepare to meet your doom." As creatures that stood at the top of the food chain in Iradia, dragons had extraordinary senses. They could judge whether there were large predators nearby by the vibration of the ground. The sensitive green dragon could even infer the species, number, and distance of the enemy. Khan had fought in Villister for many years, so he had learned this skill long ago. The vibration from the ground did not seem to be the full force of the Hejin army, but there were still quite a lot of people. Soon, the fox and wolf scouts gave the warning. The high-pitched screams spread throughout the camp. The battle lizardmen picked up their weapons and began to line up. The barbarians also quickly finished their food, kicked over the bonfire, and stood up with long hammers and stone axes. "Master, it's the cavalry." The fox and wolf leader stood outside the dragon nest and reported to him, "Line up and meet the enemy." Khan sneered and climbed out of the cave. The reason why the humans took the initiative to attack is because they want to win with the advantage of numbers. As long as this battle hurts them, those worms will be scared and Stet will not dare to come out of the fortress to fight with me again. Smoke rose from the horizon at the end of the valley. The cavalry held the flag of Bylan Kingdom and tore through the snow. "Let the barbarians stop them," Khan said calmly. "Let them all be trapped here." There were no crossbowmen, spellcasters, or heavy infantry in his army, but Khan was still not afraid of the cavalry. He had a way to stop the cavalry from charging. Under the command of the Black Death God, the barbarians stood at the front line of the battle. These Wallustans were tall and had broad chests. Their strength was comparable to that of the Green Orcs. Iradia's ordinary humans were like dwarfs in front of them. The barbarians' wrists and arms were locked with iron chains. Every link of the chains had a barb, connecting the barbarians together. They stood in 3 rows, forming a meat grinder made of flesh, stone axes, and iron chains. Anyone who tried to pass through them would be shredded and turned into bones. The Black Death God rose from the back of the army and opened his broken wings. The sound of hooves thundered. The Bylan cavalry had finally arrived. Their formation was still perfect, even in the midst of the charge. The vanguard was in a straight line, and the hundreds of war horses were only half a horse's length apart. Under the encouragement of the spellcasters, the war horses resisted the majesty of the dragons and surged forward. Draw the bow, release the arrows, draw the bow, release the arrows, draw the bow, release the arrows. This was a well-trained cavalry. Although their combat strength could not be compared to the Dawn Legion of the Rising Sun, their military quality was still praiseworthy. When they approached the Blackwing Legion, they drew their bows and fired arrows in an orderly manner. The barbarians suffered a lot from the continuous cavalry shooting. As the distance closed, Khan heard someone yell, "Step over them!" The Bylan cavalry whipped their horses. The soldiers who could serve as the vanguard were the best horsemen. The horses were also the best horses in the river. They jumped high in front of the iron chains, trying to cross the cold and strict line of defense. At this time, the barbarians suddenly jumped up. Their arched bodies were like ferocious tigers. The stone axes slashed through the air and cut into the abdomen of the horses. The whole abdomen was cut open and blood poured down. The iron thorns were activated, and the cold weapons penetrated the bones. The Bylan cavalry at the back could not even see what was happening in front. They only saw blood gushing out, and then a large number of horsemen in front fell off their horses. The barbarians ushered in a temporary victory, but the cavalry's charge did not end because of this. They rushed up almost without any gap. A barbarian had just raised a stone hammer when his chest was kicked heavily by a horse. Then his neck was cut open by a sharp blade. The vanguard bravely moved forward. The foxwolfmen and battle lizardmen pressed on the battlefield from the two sides. The roars of the monsters and the roars of the people mixed together, and the blood also mixed together. It was as if two groups of beasts were biting each other in a world of ice and snow. In the end, the nearly 10,000 Bylan cavalry were firmly blocked and could no longer advance. Seeing that the vanguard was all trapped in the iron thorns, the people at the back did not dare to charge again. In the war between the Blackwing Legion and the Rising Sun Empire, more powerful and efficient weapons were brought to the stage one after another. The cavalry that had ruled the battlefield for 2,000 years seemed to have lost its place and gradually withdrew from the stage of history. General Yuri looked up at the dragon on the ridge and gritted his teeth. Retreat. Chapter 619. East Bank of the Mawson River. It had been snowing for a long time, covering the forests and swamps in a layer of white. The soldiers stepped on the snow that reached their ankles, quietly holding their weapons in their hands. Their armor was also wrapped in a thick layer of woolen sheepskin, enough to dispel the cold brought by the wind and snow. Tyner had been waiting there for the whole night, leading the heavy infantry of the Norton Legion and the crossbowmen of the Sazal Kingdom. Snow had accumulated on his bronze helmet and black armor, piling up on his thick eyebrows, and the white breath he exhaled was like thick smoke. The wind in front of him carried the roars and cries of the battlefield, bringing with it a thick smell of blood. The scout rushed over and said, "The Bylan cavalry and the Solar Knights are fighting with the Khan Legion. The battle is fierce, and they are approaching the Mawson River." Huh, those cowards actually did it. They really attracted the monsters. Tyner was stunned, and then asked in a low voice, "What's the enemy's formation?" The Khan Legion's formation is scattered. The fastest foxwolfmen are hot on the heels of the cavalry, and have already pulled away from the battle lizardmen. The dragon seems to be worried about being attacked from behind, so it left some barbarians behind to cover the rear. Tyner pondered for a moment and slowly drew his long sword. "All troops, get ready. Advance with shields. We need to support the Bylan cavalry and take down the pursuing foxwolfmen as quickly as possible. Otherwise, when the battle lizardmen catch up, we will have to face the entire Khan Legion." Commander Stett's order is to ambush at the Mawson River, the general of the Sazal Kingdom reminded. Tyner looked at him and shook his head. The best plan now is to meet up with the Bylan cavalry first. Their war horses have to travel a long distance and fight against the might of the dragon. They might not be able to hold on for too long. If we lose our advantageous position and fight the foxwolfmen elsewhere, our losses will be great. The general of the Sazal Kingdom said softly, "Why waste our own troops to help the soldiers of other nations? If you don't want to, then stay here. I'll bring my own troops over." Tyner said in a depressed tone, "I always thought that the commander of the Bylan Kingdom was a coward, but even that coward knows that this is a battle of life and death." He risked his life to carry out Stett's orders and act as bait to launch a surprise attack. How can we, who call ourselves warriors, just watch from the sidelines? Sovin's general was irritated by his provocation. He paused and took a deep breath to calm down. He calmly replied, "All right, we'll go with you. But if you lose the battle because of disobeying orders, you, Tyner Quinn, will have to take full responsibility." In a valley of the Sicilian mountains, Con was swallowing gold coins. There was a small mountain of gold, silver, and gems in front of him. They were all the treasures that the clan monsters had collected during this period of time. The 16-meter-long black dragon did not stop moving. It bent its neck and silently ate these things, swallowing them into its stomach. The leader of the foxes and wolves, Wallace, stood behind him and did not have the slightest intention of helping Con. This was a job that the dragons had to do by themselves. If others interfered, it might cause them to be furious. Whether good or evil, the dragons always had to properly protect their treasures before taking action, hide them in their lairs, or swallow them into their stomachs. As everyone knew, except for the Black Emperor, Caesar, and Tangerine, no dragon in the whole of Iradia could resist the temptation of treasures. Even Odin could not help but look at those shiny things with shining eyes. What Con did was in line with his identity. But even if he knew the reason, Wallace was still a little anxious. It was not because of Con, but because his foxes and wolves had been chasing for a while, and there was still no news. According to the time, the horses of the cavalry should have been exhausted and become food for the foxes and wolves. As the leader of the Wolf-Shark Kingdom, Wallace was much smarter than the ordinary foxes and wolves. He knew very well that the attack of the cavalry was not a simple surprise attack. It was very likely that they wanted to lure the monsters into an encirclement. But whether it was him or Con Tangerine, they did not care if their troops were surrounded, because as long as they fought in the wild, the monsters would have an advantage. But there was still no news for a long time, which made Wallace faintly worried that something unexpected had happened. But he did not dare to leave, because Con Tangerine had not said anything. Wallace was the leader sent by the Wolf-Shark Kingdom and had the support of 3 large tribes in the kingdom. But in front of the dragons, it was not worth mentioning. He had to respect Con's power and Con's identity. The brown foxes and wolves ran wildly in the snow, rolling and kneeling in front of the Black Death, their bodies steaming with sweat. An ambush, is it? Without waiting for it to speak, Wallace had already taken a step forward. A tough battle. The foxes and wolves panted heavily. Our vanguard, chasing the cavalry, was ambushed. There were 50,000 humans. Their weapons were good, their armor was good, and they were also very good. Are they the kind that can fly? Did you see any griffins? Wallace asked urgently. He hoped that they had encountered the main force of the enemy. Then, the enemy would not have any trump cards left. All the monsters could come out in full force and crush the Hudgian army in one fell swoop. But the foxes and wolves scout shook their heads. No griffins. They were infantry and archers. They were holding shields and spears and stacked up. We could not move. We would be pierced as soon as we went up. What about the foxes' spellcasters? Blow up their shield wall. The spellcasters were killed by the Sun Knights. Wallace strode forward and picked up the fox's scout. He glared at it as if he wanted to swallow it. He wanted to ask more, but he could not. The kingdom of Wolfheart came out in full force and joined Con Tangerine's army, hoping to take revenge for the blood feud that had accumulated over the past 50 years. They wanted to conquer the entire Hydgian army, but they suffered an unbelievable defeat in the first battle. It would be fine if the enemy was the elite soldiers of the empire on which the sun never sets, but according to the Foxes and Wolf Scouts description, the enemy was just an ordinary human army from the Hydgian army. Wallace was furious. He unconsciously arched his back and showed the ferocity of a beast on his face. No wonder Prince Odin had always asked the kingdom of Wolfheart to be patient. It turned out that the foxes and wolves alone were not enough to defeat the humans from the Hydgian army. Heavy armor and spear formation. It's the Norton kingdom, right? Con said in a low voice, as if he was talking to himself. The Mazer square formation. Wallace slowly licked his sharp teeth. 20 years ago, Mazer Quinn of the Norton kingdom had designed this kind of battle formation. It was a forest of steel and iron. The well-trained soldiers held 4-meter-long spears and hid behind square shields that kept increasing in height. They used the gaps between the shields to attack continuously. It was the nightmare of all attackers. Even the Tangerine family had heard of it. Master, the vanguard has suffered great losses. We can't defeat such a battle formation with just the foxes and wolves. They need reinforcements. Wallace looked back at the giant dragon behind him. Khan was silent for a while. Then he spread his wings and said, "All right, I'll go take a look." Chapter 620. Khan flapped his wings and rose into the sky. The foxes and wolfmen were stopped by the army of the Norton Kingdom. This was an unexpected turn of events. Although the Wolfheart Kingdom was only a vassal state and could not be considered as part of the Blackwing clan, Khan was still unwilling to lose his forces and decided to personally head to the battlefield at the Mawson River. He recalled the previous battle. Stet's Griffin Legion had yet to appear, so the humans should still have a backup plan. However, if he could quickly deal with the infantry of the Norton Kingdom, he might be able to catch the humans off guard. On the other hand, after receiving the inheritance of Aslier's mark, Khan's strength had increased like never before. He urgently needed a battle to test the limits of his current abilities. The Black Dragon quickly arrived at the Mawson River and spread out his senses to scan the entire battlefield. In just a few short seconds, Khan had absorbed a large amount of information from sounds and smells. These complex information passed through his brain and formed a huge bird's-eye view of the battlefield. There was no need for anyone to report to him. At this moment, he already knew the situation of this area like the back of his hand. 50,000 Norton infantrymen with heavy armor and spears formed a thorny iron flower formation to deal with the foxes and wolfmen. There were also 20,000 light crossbowmen who were capable of long-distance shooting on the left and right sides of the battle formation. On the other hand, the Bylan cavalry and Sun Knights rejoined the battle after being ready to cut off the reinforcements of the battle lizardmen. Let me see. Where is the breakthrough? Khan searched for his target. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. The dragon let out a ferocious roar and swooped down from the sky. It plunged into the battlefield and swept up snow and dust in the air. At the same time, it used its strong front claws to flip over the shield wall in front of it. Its appearance made everyone on the battlefield seem small and weak. When it ran, it was like a steel chariot full of spikes, shaking the earth and causing the snow to rise to the height of 2 people. Although this fellow did not look as strong as the red dragon, its strength was still not to be underestimated. It could trample anyone it collided with in a meat paste. Khan! The snow was swept up by the wind and slapped on Tyner's face. He could feel the deep, scorching energy. He found that this guy was completely different from the other black dragons. He was also different from the legendary Dark Emperor. That indescribable body, full of scars, and those weirdly twisted and broken wings made people shudder at the sight of it. Turner stared intently at the dragon known as the Black Death God. It was as though he could see through its ugly body and see the gigantic, iron-like heart in its body. The heart was beating proudly, radiating a deep level of evil. "It's the abyss," Turner calmly judged. "The smell of the devil. Retreat and reorganize the formation." The commander roared. The soldiers of the Norton Kingdom quickly retreated. However, humans were no match for a dragon in terms of speed. The Black Reaper quickly caught up with the retreating soldiers. Its lightning-fast speed allowed its horns to easily pierce through the heavy armor of the Norton Kingdom. The strong soldiers were casually lifted up and thrown high into the air before falling heavily to the ground. A few elite soldiers retreated to the sides. While being chased, they suddenly stopped, rolled on the ground, and then raised their spears at an angle to counterattack. They tried to deal with the Black Death God using the usual method of besieging and killing dragons. However, to their surprise, the spears could not pierce through Khan's legs at all. Its scales were full of gaps and cracks, but they were as hard as the dead iron of the Black Rock Mountain. Flames! Blazing flames gushed out of Khan's mouth. As he twisted his neck, the flames rolled and swept across the battlefield. The snow was quickly melted into rising steam. The soldiers wailed in the flames as they painfully lost their lives. The Black Death God's actions lived up to its name. It massacred and reaped lives. "Where's my sword?" Turner waved his hand behind him. Two Norton soldiers walked up to him with exaggeratedly shaped swords. He looked at the approaching figure of the dragon, jumped off his warhorse, and held the sword in his hand. "General, it's not safe here," the guard beside him reminded. "We should retreat." "You don't understand." Turner shook his head and pointed at the dragon not far away. "It's coming for me." He took a deep breath and walked forward on foot. "You are the commander personally appointed by the king and Commander Stead. If an accident happens, the morale of the entire legion will be affected." The personal guards stopped Turner. "If we're going to fight this monster, it should be us soldiers." "You don't understand. It's precisely because I'm the commander that I should charge at the front," Turner said in a low voice. "Moreover, I'm not just a commander. I'm also a warrior known for my bravery." "All right, if you're not afraid, then come with me and kill this guy. Raise your spears," he suddenly shouted to the soldiers around him. Turner's guards and the soldiers around him immediately gathered around him. There were about 100 people in total. They held their spears in their right hands and collectively knelt down, waiting for the next order. "Blessing," Turner shouted. The mages who were heavily protected at the back began to cast spells. A series of buff spells such as strength enhancement, delayed explosion, weapon sharpening, armor penetration, and so on were activated and descended on the area where the 100 people knelt down. Khan heard the sound and looked at the 100 people not far away with his flame-like eyes. He had a premonition that the other party seemed to want to do something. He spread his wings. "Lock him down." The soldiers hiding behind the battle formation shield wall threw out thick and long iron chains, nets and chains. These were all common tools that humans used when hunting dragons. As early as the moment Khan arrived, the soldiers were already prepared. As soon as General Turner gave the order, they immediately threw the chains high up. The front end was a curved hook full of barbs, which hung firmly on Khan's scales. With thousands of soldiers pulling at the same time, even a red dragon in his prime would find it difficult to break free in a short time. Khan spread his wings, but could not fly. He was pulled apart by the concerted efforts of the soldiers and was firmly locked in place. "Throw!" This was the last order. The 100 people who knelt down immediately acted. They divided into two groups and threw their spears at the Black Death. The first group aimed at Khan's eyes. That was one of the few weak points on the dragon's body that was not covered by its scales. They were very accurate and obviously well-trained. The spears whistled through the air. Khan raised his head high. There was a suppressed growl in his throat as he exhaled from his mouth. It was acid, the super-strong acid that belonged to the ancestors of the Black Dragon. When the spears were stained by the splashed acid, fine foam immediately appeared on the surface of the spears. During the flight, they quickly dissolved at an unimaginable speed and turned into a pile of charred rust residue. The scene was so horrifying that it left everyone dumbfounded. However, Turner did not stop his order because of this. As soon as the acid landed, the second round of spears was thrown at Khan. This time, they were aimed at the mouth and throat of the Black Death God after it opened its mouth to exhale. Khan's reaction was very fast. He closed his mouth and shook his head to avoid the attack. As a result, most of the spears only hit his teeth and scales and fell down with the sound of steel colliding. Only one spear was embedded between his teeth. Boom! Delayed blast took effect. The spell exploded in Khan's mouth. The power of the explosion was so strong that he felt excruciating pain. The dragon raised his head high and a string of dark red blood flowed down his chin. At the same time, Khan raised his giant claw and slammed it on the ground. A ring of flame bloomed around him, and the soldiers around him were overturned. They could no longer hold on to the chains in their hands. The Black Death God broke free from his shackles and strode toward Turner. Chapter 621. Foxes. Khan let out an unprecedented roar. "All of you, go forward and kill this group of humans. I will reward you with all the land, treasures, and women in Hujian County." The rich rewards made the foxes and wolves' blood rush to their heads. The rich land, fragrant food, shiny treasures, and beautiful mating partners seemed to be right in front of them. They let out sharp howls in response to their masters and became even more bloodthirsty and fierce. Tyner pushed aside the personal guard in front of him and moved forward on foot. Hundreds of elite soldiers followed closely behind him. This group of people entered the battlefield at high speed. Every one of them was highly skilled and fearless. They quickly cut down the fox wolves that charged into the battle formation and closed in on the roaring Black Reaper. "Monster, look here!" Tyner roared with a ferocious expression. "I want your life." Khan lowered his head and looked at him coldly. He slowly opened his mouth, and a smile appeared on his ugly dragon face, revealing his sharp teeth. He suddenly rushed forward and raised his giant claws. "Worm!" Tyner dodged sideways and felt a stinging pain on his cheek. The Black Death God's attack was accompanied by scorching energy. It was frighteningly hot. "Scum!" Khan raised his claws and slapped again. "You are nothing!" Khan roared and spat out raging flames. "You are not qualified." Khan raised his neck high and stared at the figure swaying in the flames. He roared, "Stand in front of me!" Tyner dodged 4 times in a row and finally found a gap in the Black Death God's attack. He quickly raised his sword and slashed back. The sword and the iron scales burst into bright sparks. On his left and right, the Rosen infantrymen and the foxes toward each other. Tyner felt his heart beating fast. The continuous pressure from the Black Death God made his nerves tense. He licked his lips as if he could taste the blood. The humans have nowhere to retreat. Throw them into the river. The fox wolf leader's shriek came from behind. Wallace had taken over Khan's position and was currently giving out orders. Unknowingly, tens of thousands of Rosen soldiers had been suppressed to the riverbank. They held their spears and fought to the death, but they gradually showed signs of weakness. Behind them was the cold Mosin River, and in front of them was the surging foxwolfmen and battle lizardmen. The soldiers' weapons clashed with their weapons, and their armor clashed with each other. They were tightly stuck to each other and could no longer form the tough massal formation. The foxes and wolfmen leaped forward and tore at the bodies in ecstasy. Human and human corpses piled up on the riverbank, and fresh blood flowed into the river along with the terrain. After Khan ferociously rushed into the battlefield, the situation immediately changed. The Norton Kingdom's army was torn apart by Khan, and they were also squeezed in by the foxwolfmen, which made it impossible for them to take advantage of their heavy armor and spears. With the arrival of the battle lizardmen, the entire battle line was on the verge of collapse. The soldiers had no choice but to retreat back to the Mosin River. Stet stood on the walls of Morg Fortress and calmly watched the Norton Kingdom's soldiers fall one by one. "Commander, the Griffin Legion has arrived at the designated location. We can join the battle at any time." The adjutant's face was red with anxiety. The Norton Kingdom and Sovin's troops are in a difficult battle. If we don't send reinforcements soon, they will be completely wiped out. "Don't worry." Stet shook his head. "They still have 40,000 men. They are only temporarily intimidated by the dragons and hordes of monsters. When they realize that they have nowhere to run, their morale will be reignited and they will fight to the death with the monsters. Are you going to sacrifice them? Just let them fight for a while longer. The soldiers of the River Plain are different from us. They are stupid and blind, and their bones are filled with the genes of weakness. A small setback can destroy their will to fight, and they will run away crying for their parents. That's why you chose the Mosin River as the battlefield. Let them fight to the death." The adjutant reacted abruptly and said bitterly, "This is immoral and has no honor to speak of. You'll be judged by the arbitration tribunal because of this." "It doesn't matter. The arbitration tribunal can do whatever they want with me." Stet smiled faintly. "But no matter what, I have to win this battle. I have to cleanse the River Plain and kill Khan Tangerine. I have to wipe out the forces of the Blackwing Empire on this battlefield." The soldier who tried to sneak up on him was caught by Khan and raised up high as if he was showing off a trophy. Khan stared at the writhing soldier with his mouth wide open and let out a deafening roar. The sound was so loud that it seemed to shake the thick snow clouds in the sky. Then, he threw the soldier into his mouth. Chewing, chewing. Pieces of armor dripped from his mouth along with the blood. The Black Death god turned his head, his eyes filled with disdain. Stet felt that his breath was suppressed by the flame-like eyes. At that moment, he felt as if he had seen the Blackwing King. The Emperor's eyes were exactly the same as Caesar Tangerine's. Khan's strength was getting stronger and stronger, and his aura was getting stronger and stronger. The Infernal Sovereign's legacy had completely merged with him, and the abyssal blood was boiling. Stet knew that his end had come. This charred stench, it can't be wrong. Stet swallowed the blood in his throat and gritted his teeth. The Blackwing Empire dared to conspire with the demons and become enemies with the world. The gods will not let you go. The world. Khan sneered at his words. I thought the world was just Caesar and Enrique. Do you think the Black Emperor would care about those insignificant insects? Are they part of the world? I was confused. Stet panted. Why would monsters like you care about the disaster that the demons brought to Iradia? Or rather, you are the same as the demons. You are demons that walk on the material plane. Take care of yourself and stop talking nonsense. Khan glanced at Stet's cracked greatsword. You should feel lucky that I am different from the lords of the Empire. I am willing to take captives. If you lay down your weapons and surrender now, I can consider giving you a chance to join the Blackwing Empire and fight for me. You dragons don't have good brains at all. Stet sneered and spat out a mouthful of thick phlegm. Do you know why we are fighting? Behind me is Hujien and the Norton Kingdom. That is the land that my ancestors have protected with their lives for generations. Even the most cowardly and weakest coward will not give up his home to a monster. Then die. Khan breathed out furiously, and flames with lava came out of his mouth. Stet had already exhausted his strength and was no longer as sharp and agile as before. He was instantly covered by the boiling flames and drowned under the rolling lava. The lion's roar covered the snowy valley and the riverbank, accompanied by the crisp sound of metal clashing. Khan heard the sound and looked back. Not far away in the sky, a large golden cloud was approaching. They were roaring and approaching. It was a large group of griffins and warriors wearing bright golden armor. This troop had not moved for a long time. After crossing the river, they had been hiding in the snowy valley, using spells to cover their tracks. They were only exposed now. The fox and wolf leader shuddered slowly. It had seen the griffin at the front of the group. It was the king of griffins that Stet kept. Its size was only slightly smaller than Khan's. Stet had brought his most powerful troop out. They descended from the sky like holy knights from the kingdom of God. Chapter 622. Stet had brought the Griffin Legion with him. They came on the dark clouds of snow, lined up neatly, wearing armor blessed by the gods. Their long swords were bright and sharp, and every one of them shone brightly. Attack! Stet Feldlet waved his sword. As a large magical beast that was friendly to humans, the griffins were born with an iron will. They were not afraid of Khan's demonic dragon aura. Even if they were carrying a rider, they could still fight. They roared and swooped down. It was a golden torrent that fell from the sky. The fox-wolfmen who tried to resist fell to the ground, their bodies torn apart by the sharp fangs. Gnawing and swooping were the griffin's main means of fighting, especially when dealing with small monsters. The soldiers of the Norton Kingdom and Sazel Kingdom, who were originally prepared to die, saw the arrival of strong reinforcements at this moment. They could not help but reignite their hope and excitedly threw themselves into the battle. The situation of the battle was immediately reversed. The army of monsters was originally prepared to push the defenders into the Mosin River, but now they were attacked from both sides. They were attacked from the front and back, and they were caught in the crossfire of the allied army. Annoying flies can turn back and roar at the griffins that kept swooping down. He could not help but admire the human commander. His calculations were very thorough. He even considered using a river to block the retreat. The soldiers of the Norton Kingdom could not cross the river, and neither could the fox-wolfmen and battle-lizardmen. Master, The leader of the fox wolfmen came to his side. It will be dangerous if this goes on. Be careful not to be annihilated. Everyone, gather around me, Khan ordered slowly. He did not explain. A true dragon did not need to explain to his subordinates and servants. He could spread his wings and retreat, but he would not do so. Khan looked up at the sky and grinned. He licked his fangs one by one. He would rather lead the army to fight to the death than run away alone. If he were to escape this time, he would never be able to face his father again. He would never be able to face the Black Emperor who had just bestowed him with power. He would also never be able to fight for the inheritance rights of the Blackwing Empire from Odin. Khan knew that no matter what he did, whether it was robbing gold and silver, killing disobedient slaves, wiping out rebellious forces, taking control of the town, it was just a small matter in the eyes of the Black Emperor. Only if he won the battle before Odin and conquered the land of Hejian County would the Black Emperor take him seriously. Khan couldn't back down. This was his chance to prove himself, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He shifted his gaze from the sky to his surroundings. Thousands of monsters had shaken off their opponents and were shrieking as they gathered here and regrouped. Take your subordinates and stop the people of the Norton Kingdom, he said to the fox-wolf leader, then turned his head and ordered, Battle lizard men, follow behind me. Take your weapons. The battle lizard men immediately moved. They separated from the newly reorganized troops and gathered behind Khan in a tighter formation. They faced the Griffin Legion and lined up their spears in a row. This was the importance of a commander. With the Norton Kingdom's general killed, even if there was a replacement, they would not be able to quickly control the entire army. Even if Khan's army was in danger, they would not be able to put too much pressure on him. The main offensive had to be carried by the Griffin Legion. On the other side, the monsters were quickly reorganized under Khan's orders and regrouped into an effective fighting force. Tear them apart. The Black Death God roared and charged forward with all four limbs. Tens of thousands of battle lizard men charged with him, with the battle lizard men blocking the Norton Kingdom's infantrymen behind them. They no longer had to face the Griffin Legion. At this moment, all the plans were laid bare. All that was left was a battle of pure strength. This was the final battle of the River Plain. The roar of the dragon reverberated throughout the battlefield. After a few attacks, the griffins were entangled and mixed with the monsters. At this point in the battle lizard men still had energy to spare. The more injured they were, the fiercer they became. Under Khan's leadership, they fought desperately with the Griffin Legion. The casualties on both sides were increasing rapidly. None of the soldiers on the front line could survive more than 10 minutes. One griffin after another fell under the spears of the battle lizard men, and wave after wave of battle lizard men took over the battlefield. Stet watched from behind the formation and stared at the blood-soaked dragon. This battle had been going on for too long, and he was worried. He did not expect the monsters to be so tenacious. They could still maintain their fighting strength despite being attacked from both sides. However, based on the current situation, the Griffin Legion would win sooner or later. Even if the dragon did its best, it would only cause him to lose a few more soldiers. However, the Tangerine family did not have many dragons, and Khan was a member of the Blackwing Empire's royal family. Would the monsters be willing to let the dragon die here? He suddenly trembled as he heard a strange roar coming from the back of the Griffin Legion. Did those trash let the barbarians break through? The thought flashed through Stet's mind, but he immediately denied it. No, if it were the barbarians, the Sun Knights would have reported it. He looked up at the source of the sound. Under the clouds, at the end of his line of sight, huge wings flapped the wind and snow. Hundreds of dragons approached with suppressed roars. The battle cries suddenly weakened. The soldiers and monsters could not help but look to the west to see the dragons. Metal dragons? Stet smelled something unfamiliar and frowned deeply. He remembered that the platinum dragon god Bahamut had sent down an oracle, ordering the metal dragons not to be involved in this battle and to migrate to other dimensions to seek refuge. How could Iradia still have metal dragons left? As the distance closed, Stet gradually saw the appearance of the dragons. They were not metal dragons, but a group of repulsive radiation dragons. Their bodies were full of mutated muscles and pus, but strangely, they exuded the noble aura of the metal dragons. These dragons of unknown origins quickly joined the battlefield. They were different from ordinary radiation dragons, as they did not engage in close combat. Instead, they fought using spells like the gold and silver dragons. They bombarded the Griffin Legion from afar, advancing and slaughtering like a group of spellcasters. Stek cannot stop them. Lord Khan, we are here to help you in this battle. The new dragon leader landed beside Khan. Khan bit the griffin into several pieces. Fur and blood spurted out of his mouth. He glanced at it and said, I don't remember you being one of the leaders of the radiation dragons. Who are you? We are dragons hatched by Her Highness Odin using the Oracle of Wishes. We are not in the list of the radiation dragons. The dragon leader shook its head and bowed slightly. Her Highness Odin ordered us to protect you. You can call me Vivian. Odin, Khan frowned deeply. She is trapped in the central battlefield. She can't even take care of herself and is suppressed by the Daybreak Legion. How could she send troops to Hejin County to intervene here? She is crazy. Vivian was silent for a while. Her voice was very soft. Her Highness Odin said that Khan is her brother. Khan was stunned. He had stayed in Vilas for a long time. His impression of Odin had long been blurred. He could only hear bits and pieces about the Lord of Twilight from other people. At this time, he suddenly remembered something. Probably not long after he was born, Garen and Bulonia invited Odin to Vilas to play. At that time, he still did not understand the blood relationship between himself and Odin. He was only interested in the gift his father gave to Odin. He immediately pounced and wanted to snatch the thing in Odin's hand. Then, he was sent flying by a radiation dragon that appeared out of nowhere. The slaves in charge of serving him immediately surrounded him and said that it was Princess Odin's thing and that he could not touch it. Khan shouted at the slaves and spat out weak acid. Odin was probably very young at that time. He did not know what to do under the protection of a large group of radiation dragons. He could only look at him with his eyes wide open. That incident caused Bulonia to be furious. He was severely punished because of it. For some reason, Odin did not bring the gift when he left. Chapter 623. I'm really impatient. Aslier said, look at these mountains, rivers, and those lush trees. Every time I see them, I can't control myself. I want to burn and crush them. Caesar, think about it. How good it would be if there were only flames and ashes left in this world. Not good at all. The black dragon crouched on a mountainside, its huge head popping out from behind the mountain. It looked at the ferocious wolf in the distance with great interest. You're talking about the abyss. The material plane should be like this. Oh, you said you're going to burn the rising sun city to ashes, but you've been lying here all day. Asliers shouted discontentedly. Can you not waste time? You're annoying me. Don't worry. Caesar looked calm. Since we have decided to form an alliance and stand on the same front, I have to reveal some information to you and introduce a few friends to you. You're such an annoying guy. How can you have friends? The Lord of the Infernal Prison sneered. Let me guess, you haven't found other demon lords, have you? No, the insect erosion channel has not been penetrated. They can't enter the material plane. There's no reason for them to cooperate with you. They're not demons. Caesar shook his head. Well, speaking of which, I don't know if they can be called friends. My relationship with them is a bit strange. Black Dragon, I'll inform you in advance that I won't kill your little companions, but I'll make them suffer a little. They actually dared to neglect an Abyss Sovereign King and wear down my patience again and again. I'll teach them what respect is. Aslier snorted. Don't stop me later. Indeed, they should be taught a lesson. Black Dragon nodded again and again with a look of agreement. You do it, I'll watch from the side. The light of the cross flickered in the blue, cloudless sky, followed by the thunder of the air being violently stirred. Caesar raised his head, his heart beating a little faster. Dodge! Dodge! Iradia's gravity is a bit exaggerated. I can't control myself. A lively voice rang in Caesar's ears, but he did not think that the other party was joking at all. He immediately moved his huge body to the side, retreating several thousand meters in an instant. The sunlight was blocked, and a red meteor fell from the sky. The surface of the meteor was burning with raging flames. As it fell, it let out a joyful cry. Ah! Asliers was alarmed. What's that? You'll find out soon enough. Before Caesar could finish his sentence, the object falling from the sky had already blocked his vision. It smashed into the ground with a loud bang, and a huge shockwave swept out in all directions. The entire mountain range immediately collapsed, and magma spewed out from the Earth's crust. The cracks in the Earth spread far and wide. The lord of the infernal prison stared at the pile of smoke with incredulity in his eyes. Kuingu, Dios. As one of the most powerful dragons in the star realm, the demons were second only to Xylan in fear of Kuingu Dios. The red dragon had once joined the abyssal battlefield and had slain 800,000 demons with a single breath. It was only after the three pillar gods intervened that it was finally forced out of the abyssal battlefield. Caesar could even imagine Asliers trembling uncontrollably. The red dragon crawled out of the lava, and he was even larger than the largest dragon in this world, the Black-Winged Monarch. He was like a mountain that one had to look up at, and this was only after he had adapted to Iradia's laws. Who knew just how massive this guy's true body was? Kuingu Jios surveyed his surroundings with his crimson eyes before letting loose a long cry. The Emperor of Iradia is back. My dear Silver Dragon, Green Dragon, Titan, Fairy Tree Monster, and everyone else, how are you doing? Caesar averted his gaze. This is a secret gathering. Everyone knows that you're here. Don't worry about it. The red dragon strode forward and slapped the black dragon's shoulder with all his might, making Caesar's joints throb with pain. My true flames will burn all of those spies to death in the instant that they see me. The gods might be able to detect some clues, but they're all cowards, and they don't dare to look. Ha! Mad Clamor didn't come with you? Caesar asked. He's currently spying on Pyro and has no time for you. I don't know when the sun god gave him an opportunity. The red dragon glanced at the flame patterns on Caesar's body. Hi, Asliers, right? I remember you. You betrayed the abyss as well. The lord of the infernal prison could no longer feign death, and he emerged from the black dragon's scales before reverting back to his human form. He was as obedient as a harmless rabbit, and even his skull had become oversized. Master, Kuingu Dios. After greeting him, the red dragon immediately began to rummage through his own body, upon which a bunch of random items fell out. I brought you a present, Caesar. Found it. The red dragon turned around with an excited expression with a sealing crystal in his paw. Here, the fairy queen of the Tilavens world. This is the biggest one I can find. Do you like her? Caesar didn't dare to accept this, as little Luna was going to cry herself to death if he were to take this back. However, even though Kuingu Jios appeared to be quite carefree, he was actually quite moody. Caesar hadn't figured out how to interact with him yet, so he didn't know how to turn him down. However, the red dragon immediately retracted his paw at the sight of Caesar's hesitation before stuffing the sealing crystal into his backside. It's fine if you don't want it. Let's get down to business. Why are you looking for me? Caesar fell silent for a moment before spreading open his wings. Two things. Take a look at this first. There was an undetectable eyeball hidden within his right wing. It was an ugly purplish color with a bloodshot pupil. Caesar didn't know if it was just an illusion, but the eyeball moved imperceptibly under the scrutiny of all of the mutant dragons. The red dragon's expression became serious. Outer God. That's right. Caesar nodded. I've tried many times to pull out my entire wing, but it would still grow back in the end, as if it had always been a part of my body. I see. No wonder you wanted Mad Clamor to come with me. This is a sign of decay. The red dragon continued. Mad Clamor is researching these things, but he most likely doesn't have a solution. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become a lunatic himself. Kuingu Jios chortled with glee at the sight of Caesar's furrowed brows. But don't cry. Don't worry, It won't be able to kill you before this thing grows all over your body. Caesar fell silent again. Is it here? A frivolous tone interrupted the two dragons. Accompanied by the sound of storms and tsunamis, the projection of the Lord of Calamity gradually materialized and leaned on his lightning spear. Long time no see, Congudius, Caesar. Talos, you pig-like thing, aren't you dead yet? The red dragon curled his lips. How unlucky. Chapter 6:24. You don't have to be so polite, Kuingudios. The red dragon's sarcasm didn't affect the Lord of Calamity at all. He still maintained his smile. How can I be one step ahead of you when even a scourge like you is still alive? This was probably how the evil camp greeted each other. Whether it was the fire demon lord, the Lord of Calamity, the red dragon, the black dragon, or the white dragon mad clamor, they were all bad people in the eyes of the world. Every one of them was a walking disaster. And that was indeed the case. Nothing good ever happens to you. Kuingudios shook his head and snorted. What do you want this time? Caesar's invitation. We are now allies, Talos said calmly. Allies? The red dragon snorted. He seemed to know the Lord of Calamity very well. I guess Caesar didn't get anything from you, right? Haha, just let me back then. It's better to go to the devil than deal with you. At least the devil is trustworthy and knows how to pay. The flames on Aslier's head surged. He glanced at the mountain-like red dragon and seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he let it go. Don't say that. The Lord of Calamity was very serious. I also contributed that time. If I hadn't stopped Moradin, you wouldn't have been able to escape. He turned his gaze to the black dragon. As for Caesar, it gave him my right eye. Hasn't I been lost recently? Yes, that's the case. Caesar nodded. The right eye of the Lord of Calamity was Odin's teacher, Lord Corgi of the Blackwing Empire. It went to guard the Trade Federation when the Black Dragon was asleep. Later, when the war broke out, the 3 central city-states were lost, and Corgi was nowhere to be found. Odin still hadn't found it until now. The Lord of Calamity, Talos, stretched out his hand, which was covered in electric arcs, and tore open the void barrier. He grabbed a twisting eyeball from the chaotic vortex and threw it in front of Black Dragon. Here, that idiot was hunted down and escaped to the outer space with the starship left by Quell Dorii. He kept jumping to a remote area far away from the Origin Sea, so he couldn't absorb any energy to return and almost died there. Talos' voice was filled with disdain. He was very disdainful of the self-awareness of the eyeballs. Caesar stared at the eyeball for a while, walked up to it, stepped on it, and crushed it twice before pulling it out. Don't play dead. Go to the central region. I have something for you to do. Corgi immediately came to life, running away with a whoosh. It seemed that he was extremely afraid of the Sovereign of Calamity. It seems like you've put in a lot of effort. You even dug out your eyeballs and gave them to others. As expected of the demonic god. So ruthless. Kuingudios asked in a sarcastic voice. So what's the plan this time? Talos. You'll have to ask your new member. The Sovereign of Calamity raised his chin. As you can see, I'm at war with the empire on which the sun never sets. I can take care of Iradia on my own. Caesar spoke frankly. I called you here to ask for your help in fending off the human gods. Iradia is the personal territory of the sun god, and one of Pyro's biggest sources of faith. If the human race is in danger, there's no way he'll just stand by and watch. Talos paused for a moment before continuing. If Pyro intervenes, then Carilon, the main god of the elves, and Moradin, the main god of the dwarves, will definitely side with him. We'll have to deal with at least 3 greater gods, as well as a bunch of sub-gods and subordinate gods. I've also offended Mistra. Caesar reminded. Only then did he recall that he had killed the descendants of the mother of magic in the material plane. That's 4 greater gods. Talos couldn't help but sneer. You sure know how to stir up trouble. Tiamat and I also have a lot of conflict. Caesar continued to remind him. Talos wanted to leave. It's just 4 greater gods. What's there to be afraid of? The Crimson Dragon snorted with a strange expression on his face. Don't worry about Tiamat. She might stand on our side in the end. If you can stop them, I can unify Iradia and help you block the devil's worm-eroded channel." When Caesar said this, he deliberately glanced at Asliers and found that the lord of the infernal prison had no emotional fluctuations. It seemed that he really didn't have a sense of alignment. Most of the chaotic evil were like this. They were extremely selfish and only did things based on their own likes and dislikes. Whether or not the worm-eroded channel is a matter of the future. As long as Caesar can destroy the empire on which the sun never sets, Pyro will suffer a great blow. If we join forces, even if we can't kill him, we can strip a lot of priesthoods and divinities from him. Talos said to the red dragon, "Tell this to the mother of evil dragons. She should be interested. There's no need for that." Congudius waved his paw in a nonchalant manner, as if saying, "Leave Tiamat to me." "All right, I'll leave you to it then. I still have something to do." The projection of the calamity goddess gradually disappeared into thin air, leaving behind a string of bubbles that were constantly popping. "I have to leave too. I'm going to be suppressed if I stay here any longer." The red dragon said to Caesar, "Talos is not trustworthy, so we have to take care of this. The mutated dragons will find a way to stop the gods. You don't have much time. The demons are about to arrive." "I know." Caesar nodded. "Then I'll be going now. I haven't fought in a long time, so I have to get my children trained first." Why do I still feel a little excited?" Kuingu Jio's murmuring became quieter and quieter. Caesar squatted down in the lava and looked on as the red dragon's massive body disappeared into the sky. The sun was about to set, and golden light burst forth from the dark clouds, illuminating the black dragon's face. Only after the red dragon had disappeared for a long time did Asliers heave a sigh of relief. It's not as simple as he made it out to be. These dragons and gods all have allies, and who knows how many lives will be affected by this battle. Those evil gods, abominations, and evil beings will most likely join the battle as well. The entire star realm is going to be plunged into chaos. The lord of the infernal prison sighed with emotion. "I'm really looking forward to it." Caesar shot a glance at him. "You finally dare to speak. Are you mocking me?" Asliers faltered slightly before erupting into a fit of rage. Several dozen pillars of fire erupted into the sky, and the lava that the red dragon had detonated was now under his control. "I remember now. You did this on purpose. You deliberately concealed their identities. Black Dragon, I'm going to rip your mouth apart. You're getting angry." Caesar couldn't be bothered to respond. He turned around and squatted down with his back facing Asliers. Surging flames exploded on the black dragon's scales, and the lord of the infernal prison roared, "Black Dragon, what are you afraid of? Look me in the eye. Fight me. What a waste of energy. I'm not going to fight you. You have to." Asliers grabbed onto Caesar's tail and dragged him back, leaving a deep trench in the ground. "Otherwise, you'll have to bow and beg for mercy. Otherwise, I won't forgive you." All right, I apologize." Chapter 6:25. Dark clouds pressed down on the city. In the evening, Ganwa was as dark as a cold night. The snowy wind blew from the south like a knife, and the blood-stained roaring dragon flag fluttered. The horn buzzed. Bulonia held Odin's hand and stood in the tower. After tasting the power of the Blackwing tanks, the Dawn Legion decided to retreat completely and built a tight defensive line. Ganwa. This usually inconspicuous barren land was now a protrusion of the Dawn Legion's front line. It was like a protruding thong, posing a huge threat to the Blackwing clan and becoming the key to the main battlefield. The humans knew the importance of Ganwa better than Blackwing. In a very short period of time, they used magic to build an unbreakable fortress group. Even if Blackwing continued to increase troops and launched dozens of attacks under Odin's leadership in half a month, they only took down 3 fortresses and pushed the front line 15 kilometers. Odin looked at the black shadows surging under the tower and said, "In the early hours of the morning, a radiation dragon nest in the swamp was attacked. Of the 30 radiation dragons, Only 7 returned. Escape back? Bealonia was shocked. The scouts didn't notice. The other party should only be a small force. How could it cause so many casualties? It's a group of dwarf mages. The leader seems to be called Marin. I've heard of this name. Bealonia thought for a moment and said, It's Marin Blazing Star, right? A dwarf prince. When the swamp dwarves fell apart, only he took the Blazing Star clan to the south to provide dwarven magic technology to the empire on which the sun never sets. Those annoying creator puppets were made by Marin. Is he very powerful? Odin looked down at her, his face a little tired. All the dwarf kings are blessed by Moradin, Bealonia said. But don't worry. Other than Blazing Star, the other 2 dwarf clans are under the Great Emperor. McNeil has already brought his Thunderblade clan here. I'll send him to deal with Marin. As he spoke, little Bealonia's expression gradually became excited. It will be very fun when the time comes. You want them to kill each other? Odin frowned. I don't think it's a good idea. There's nothing wrong with that. The Dwarven alliance fell apart, and the Dwarven kings had already turned against each other at that time. Now that I've arranged for them to meet, the dwarves should be thanking me. Bealonia giggled, not to mention that Macne knows Prince Marin very well. He is the most suitable candidate to deal with the Blazing Star clan. Anyway, I don't think it's a good idea, but I'll listen to you. Odin said. Seeing that the troops below had finished gathering, he said, I should go. Don't go. Bealonia pulled her hand. You haven't rested in a long time, Odin, you big idiot. The war had continued until now, and it was a huge test of the spirit, will, and faith of both sides. Bealonia knew that the black-winged princess, who used to be the most sleepy in the palace, had not closed her eyes for half a month. She had been standing on the front line of the battlefield. She could barely be considered a fake god, but even a real god needed to meditate and rest to absorb faith and strength. This guy was just trying to hold on. It's useless even if you go. The Radiant Moon Circle knows how to deal with you and the Eternal Spear. Bealonia said quickly, not afraid of hurting Odin's self-esteem. It can suppress you now and even kill you. I know. Odin nodded seriously. As the person involved, she knew better than Bealonia. As the number of times they fought increased, the data collected by the Radiant Moon Circle became richer and more comprehensive. Every time they fought with that thing, it was more dangerous and more difficult than the last time. She took a deep breath and was silent for a while before she finally said, I'm not going to face it directly. This time, I'll use the tactics you taught me before. You're finally enlightened. Bealonia's eyes lit up. That's the only way. We have to defeat the Dawn Army as soon as possible. Odin said in a low voice, in order to support this war, the entire empire has been mobilized. Manager Hogg has raised taxes 5 times in a row. The taxes that citizens have to pay are 6 times more than 10 years ago. The fields in the 4 provinces of the country are barren, and the clan lairs stationed in various places have long been empty. The voices of resistance and rebellion are getting louder and louder, and there are people hanged by the demon hounds in many places. As long as the Great Emperor is here, the empire will not collapse. Bealonia interrupted her expressionlessly. The situation in the Rising Sun City is even worse. If we drag it out, we'll win. Odin stopped talking and jumped off the tower, landing lightly on the ground. The soldiers of the Black Wings were waiting for her, exhaling bursts of white air. They did not need words of encouragement. After receiving the order to march, they immediately set off under the leadership of the clan leader. The continuous army was like a long black worm, silently wriggling forward. The horizon was like a flat, sharp blade. The sun flag of the Rising Sun City was looming under the falling snow. The eyes of the Dawn Army slowly turned, watching the approaching Black Wings army. After marching for a while, the monsters received the order to charge. The entire vanguard formation began to speed up. The steam tanks started moving, the tracks rattling. The heavily armored gray centaurs raised their hooves, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The spell formation of the Dawn Army was right in front of them. It was a terrible killing field. A large number of spell veins crisscrossed. The spellcasters, under the heavy protection of spears, swords, and halberds, steadily constructed spell models to welcome the incoming Blackwing soldiers. Suppress them. Don't let them cast spells. Suppress the enemy's position. The goblins in the driver's cabin screamed, and the steam tanks let out ear-piercing roars. They opened fire as they advanced, and the long and thick barrels burst into flames. The shells directly smashed into the enemy's defensive line and exploded. The explosion and roar tore apart the calm camouflage of Ganwa. For 20 days, there was not a day without the sound of fighting. The Blackwings and the Rising Sun City had invested nearly 1 million troops. It was roughly estimated that this ruthless meat grinder had swallowed the lives of 300,000 soldiers. What was terrible was that this terrible number would continue to rise today. Today is the day to wipe away the shame of the clan. Heavy cavalry, charge! The centaur leader roared and slapped the heavy armor on his waist and abdomen with the long handle of his spear, making a crisp sound. After entering the sprinting stage of preparing for battle, the heavy cavalry advanced faster and faster. The men and horses chased each other in the rolling snow and dust, almost running close to each other. They gradually broke away from the cover of the tanks and shot at the enemy like a sharp arrow. All of this was within Bulonia's expectations. The Dawn Army, who had the eyes of detection, saw everything. Of course, they were also clear about the changes in the Blackwing's formation. The humans quickly pulled the front line apart, and tens of thousands of Dawn spearmen emerged from the left and right wings. This was obviously an outflanking formation. General Lion used the same old trick to deal with the heavy cavalry in the Battle of Kohor. But what he did not expect was that the Twilight Lord, who had been fighting against the Radiant Moon's circle for dozens of days, changed her strategy this time. She changed her shape, disguised herself as an ordinary gray horse, and launched a charge with the heavy cavalry. Chapter 626. Floating City descended from the clouds with the moon ring. It didn't find its opponent. Odin, who was very punctual before, didn't appear this time. This tall and majestic city landed in front of the Dawn Army's formation. The wind brought by the cavalry made its flag flutter. It stood calmly, like a majestic mountain that would never collapse. This scene made the gray centaurs who were preparing to charge feel uneasy. Floating City had never joined the ground battlefield before. The gray centaurs raised their hooves and stopped less than 400 meters away from Floating City. It was very difficult to control such a huge cavalry to stop. The gray centaurs gasped for breath, waiting for their leader's orders. The centaur leader, Kedin, glanced at Odin secretly. Charge! Princess Black Dragon, who was disguised as a small soldier, said softly. Charge! Don't stop. There's no path for us behind. The centaur leader turned his head and roared. The heavy cavalry immediately rushed out and arranged themselves in a straight line. The raised spears and lances shone with cold light. Exploding flames. The moon ring inside, Floating City spun. Odin was one step ahead of the centaur leader and felt the ground shaking. It was different from the attack of the Dawn Army spellcasters. It contained several times more energy. The snow and dust on the ground rose into the sky. The clear snowflakes were wrapped in surging flames. The magma in the depths of the earth seemed to be awakened. The flames that had been suppressed for a long time gushed out. They were as thick as a giant tree and as straight as an arrow. The ground where the gray centaurs ran cracked and exploded. The flames bloomed like a flower. But Dan leaped. The flames washed half of his body, and the airwaves rolled. He still felt an unbearable burning pain through the heavy armor carefully made by the dwarves. He used to be the bravest warrior in the Grey Man Ma clan, but in such a battlefield, he was like a splash in the torrent. He could only hear the roar of the torrent in his ears. He tried his best, but he couldn't make his own voice. A gray centaur was swallowed by the flames not far in front of Kedin. The moment the flames licked, the armor all over his body cracked, and his hair quickly disappeared. The next moment, he was torn apart by the energy in the flames. The burning fragments of his body splashed in all directions. Kedon had heard the radiation dragon who followed Odin tell him about the various horrors of Floating City. But when he really faced this mountain, he couldn't help but be frightened. Floating City was the real meat grinder. The moon ring inside it didn't work emotionally. It repeatedly killed all the enemies who tried to challenge the rising sun city. We must rush over, Odin whispered. Accelerate. Kedon waved his spear. Smash that city. Roar. The gray centaur roared. It threw off its helmet and sped up, no longer dodging. Since it had already entered the attack range of the radiant moon ring, the only path left for it was to advance. Its attacks were indeed terrifying, but the heavy cavalry had all been trained to face attacks head-on, regardless of whether it was arrows, swords, or bursting flames. Chain lightning. The second attack was a range attack. This was a saturated attack where energy was squandered without any consideration. When the lightning struck down, it was like countless silver snakes slithering into the cavalry formation. Many men and horses screamed and couldn't control their galloping bodies. They were paralyzed and fell to their knees. Then, they were trampled into mud by their companions who rushed up from behind. Great Princess. Kedon's eyes were red. He gritted his teeth and said, "If we charge like this, we may all die here." Odin avoided the eyes of the centaur leader. She knew the power of Floating City better than anyone else. The gray centaur's charge was like an egg striking a stone. Her order was tantamount to directly asking these loyal soldiers to die. She suddenly felt a burst of sadness. The strong gray centaurs rushed past her. The galloping horses did not stop for a moment. They charged towards Floating City, but one by one they fell. Wherever they went, they left a thick trail of blood. Broken limbs and bodies were everywhere. But the gray centaurs behind always stepped on the dead companions in front of them and continued to move forward. "Don't hesitate. Don't be soft-hearted, Odin." Beolonia's voice sounded in her ear. "I know those are living soldiers, but you must forget these and treat them as numbers. This is war. As long as the gray centaurs can bring you into Floating City, then none of their lives matter. It doesn't matter if they all die. Cold-blooded, ruthless, decisive. This is the world of the evil dragons. This is the principle of the Tangerine family. Cowards are not qualified to sit on the throne. Do you understand? Odin, you could have been stronger." The Black Dragon Princess looked left and right at the running gray centaurs. Their armor was broken, their bodies were stained with blood, and they stuck close to each other to support each other. They held their spears firmly in their hands. They were all looking at her. Their eyes were filled with hesitation, worry, sorrow, and other complex emotions, but there was no timidity. Odin suddenly understood that their hesitation and doubts were all because of her weakness and indecisiveness. If she had realized this earlier and carried out Beolonia's plan from the beginning, Floating City might have been broken through long ago. It was because of her that Floating City was still standing. Every day, thousands of lives of the Blackwing clan were harvested. Then continue. Odin roared for the first time. At all costs, charge. Glory to the gray centaurs. Boom, boom. The tanks were attacking the city walls. The goblins did not wait for the order given to them by the Blackwing Princess. They followed the heavy cavalry at full speed. Kudan led the team through the raging flames and thunderstorm. Many people were directly hit by the terrifying energy and exploded into pieces. The gray centaur warriors on both sides had already died. He hated the majestic city from the bottom of his heart. It was because of it that half of the heavy cavalry died in the charge. Ever since the gray centaur warriors were equipped with heavy armor, this was something that had never happened before. No matter how advanced the Floating City was, he did not care anymore. The gray centaur warriors must break through the city today. The Floating City was close at hand. It was surrounded by a force field. Even light was refracted and deflected. A terrible weight fell on the cavalry approaching at high speed, easily crushing them to the ground. The powerful force brought by the charge forced the gray centaurs to move forward a distance on the ground, but they could no longer raise their spears. The force field squeezed their hearts and took away their lives. This was the result of approaching the floating city. But in the next moment, a blood-stained black figure suddenly flashed out. He took the lead and rushed out of the cavalry formation. His hands and hooves were bleeding black and red, but his movements were not hindered. He jumped high in the snow and dust, the tip of his spear rolling like a drill. He crashed into the city wall with unstoppable force. Crack! When the spear hit the wall, there was no explosion as expected. There was only a soft sound that could not be heard. However, the wall that even tanks could not break through was now cracked and collapsed, revealing a dark hole. "Quick!" Dan roared. Odin did not stop for a moment. Before the roar died down, he had already jumped over Dan's body and rushed into the floating city. The radiant moon ring misjudged Dan's strength. In the process of the charge, he broke through the shackles of mortals and stepped into the ranks of legends. "I did it!" Dan fell to the ground powerlessly. Blood flowed out of the cracks in his armor. Glory to the Gray Centaurs. The leader of the Gray Centaurs of the Blackwing Empire died in battle. Chapter 6:27. Black Dragon. "I think we're in trouble," Aslier suddenly said. Caesar raised his eyelids. This guy was lying under a waterfall, letting the water wash his body. His scales reflected a metallic luster under the sunlight, looking relaxed and content. Not long ago, news of victory came from the central region. Odin led the troops to break through the Dawn Army's defense line, took Ganwa, and advanced to the border of the Empire where the sun never sets. On the other side, Garen had also successfully landed and opened up a second battlefield. Even if the great Emperor Caesar slacked off every day, he could still see the Empire's territory constantly expanding. "Be serious." Aslier's raised his voice. "I'm talking to you. I'm listening." Black Dragon curled up his legs and turned over to wash his belly. "Abyss Lords have already landed," the Fire Demon King said coldly. Caesar was startled. "Are you sure? The worm-eroded passage hasn't been penetrated yet. How can they enter the material plane?" Aslier's appeared and made the water flow disappear. "Have you forgotten how I got here? Someone in Bator, Hell, colluded with the demons and opened up a teleportation passage. I told you to kill that bitch Glagia." Caesar turned back and closed his eyes slightly. He thought for a while and said, "Glagia wanted to make a deal with me to kill you. They came to stop the demons, so this matter shouldn't have anything to do with them. There are other camps among the demons. Now is not the time to talk about that bitch." Aslier snorted. "Someone walked the same path as me and crushed all the toys I left in the passage. It seems like a bad-tempered guy with great strength. We don't need to care about this kind of thing, right?" Caesar said, "I'll let my kin send the news to Glagia later. Let the demons and demons continue to fight in the material plane. But that demon lord is coming for me. Last time, I didn't respond to the call of the Lord of the Dark Cloud. When the news reached the bottomless abyss, that person went crazy and prepared to kill his way to the material plane. If it weren't for the invasion of the outer gods and the fact that it was too difficult for a pillar god to leave the abyss, I might have been crushed into a flame by the Lord of the Dark Cloud. But didn't you say that the Dark Cloud Lord couldn't control you? Under normal circumstances, yes. If he wants to kill me, I can escape to the astral plane, but aren't I working with you to guard Iradia?" Aslier said matter-of-factly, "I understand." Caesar shook his head to shake off the water stains on his body as the flame demon's flames were blocked outside. "I didn't get any benefits from allying with you. I still have to help you resolve the crisis first. TSK, tell me, what do you plan to do? You should have guessed it. That guy is definitely stronger than me. Otherwise, the Dark Cloud Lord wouldn't have sent him. But I still have you as an ally." Aslier chuckled. "Let's work together to kill him. When the time comes, you can eat his flesh, bones, and blood, and I'll eat his virtual divinity. Everyone will benefit." The bone-chilling ice-flame demon spread out from his words. The nature of an evil creature was exposed. "Okay." Caesar nodded and agreed. He didn't need the virtual divinity. To this dragon, the body of the Lord of the Abyss might be more useful. But before that, We need more information. The bottomless abyss. The endless wind of blood howled, and the water outside the Silver Palace rippled slightly. Inside the Silver Palace, the Lord of the Dark Cloud, Graz Et, was wearing a warlock's costume and sitting quietly with his hands on his knees. A naked banshee walked out from the depths of the Silver Palace, holding a magic item in both hands and respectfully presenting it to Graz Et. The Lord of the Dark Cloud, Lord, waved his hand, indicating for her to put it down. Have you arrived at Kuntuda? The naked banshee nodded. I can feel that Iradia has gradually become the center of the world, the key to everything. The Lord of the Dark Cloud, Lord, closed his eyes slightly. Because of the worm-eaten tunnel, the gods have all placed their attention on this originally insignificant material plane. I really feel sorry for Asliers, the naked banshee said softly. As a pioneer, he could have advanced another level and become an existence on the same level as Kuntuda. He's nothing. He's just a piece of trash. The Lord of the Dark Cloud, Lord's eyebrows twitched, showing his anger. Kuntuda will swallow his flames and excrete him into a pile of smelly shit. Through this peerless magic item, they could actually cross the many barriers and see Iradia's image. In the image, a grayish-white crawling thing was slowly moving forward. Its heavy long tail was dragged behind it, sweeping away the traces it left behind. This was an island in the far North Sea. It walked on the sand in the open air. Behind it, the ground that was brushed by its long tail changed imperceptibly. There was a soft rustling sound, and tiny ants lifted the soil layer and drilled out. It was not just one or two, but a large number of ants, earthworms, scorpions, and all kinds of poisonous insects. It was hard to imagine that so many creatures were hiding in this seemingly peaceful land. At this moment, they all seemed to be summoned by some kind of voice. They all ran out of their nests, lined up behind the crawling thing, climbed onto its body, and then exploded. It was as if there was a huge vortex, like a knife twisting and swallowing all these tiny lives. The center of the vortex was blood red. The whole island was undergoing unimaginable changes because of its walk. Wherever the crawling thing passed, the trees decayed and life turned into dust. If one jumped into another dimension and looked down, they would see that the whole island was being swallowed and sucked dry by an invisible force. This island was dying. Across a forest, a group of horsemen on wargs were patrolling the island. They were the garrison of the Blackwing Empire on Kalwa Island. Because the Empire did not pose any threat to the north, these cavalry were not the Empire's main force. Their work was very leisurely, and they were usually only responsible for hunting ferocious species and dealing with pirates. The crawling thing was quickly crawling towards them. The horsemen wanted to shout orders, but an inexplicable force poured over them, making their hearts ache and making it difficult for them to breathe. Even if they were not part of the main force, these professional soldiers who had undergone training did not show too much discomfort. They endured the intense discomfort and drew their weapons to point at the approaching gray figure. This was a warning that could be expressed without words. The crawling thing did not stop and quickly approached. The patrol captain gripped his weapon tightly, his intuition telling him that danger was approaching. He pulled the saddle rope and wanted to retreat, but the ferocious warg under him had already knelt on the ground, its red eyes revealing great fear, and its muscles were trembling. Bang! The patrol captain fired. The bullet pierced through the crawling thing's body. It paused for a moment, as if stunned, but it was not injured. After a moment, it quickly approached again. At this time, the horsemen finally saw what it looked like. It looked like a flowing mass of grayish-white pus, and the outline of claw-like limbs could be seen at the corners. On its indiscernible face, there were two vortexes acting as eye sockets, and below it was a wide open mouth that looked like it was laughing silently, with sharp teeth gradually forming. I've never seen something like this. The horsemen's thoughts stopped. They were no longer afraid, and their hearts stopped beating. After a long time, the crawling thing finally formed a huge humanoid demon body. It stretched lazily, and the island it was originally standing on was no longer there. the 173rd level of the abyss, the king of gluttony, Kuntida. Chapter 628. The dark clouds were very low, and the surface of the sea was undulating. The white starship cut through the thick clouds, leaving grayish-white traces. Qual Doriai's technology, you actually got your hands on it, Asliers said loudly amidst the rumbling. It was originally sent to help Odin, but it doesn't seem to be useful over there now. Caesar's voice was not soft either. Let's use it as my ship first. After all, you're the king of the Black Wings in name. I can't possibly ride you on an expedition, right? Have you ever heard of riding a demon to war? Idiot. If anyone is riding, it should be me riding you. Caesar, you probably haven't had the experience of being someone's mount, right? Why don't you let me try? Asliers looked up and down at the huge, steel-like black dragon. TSK. Riding a dragon like this, even among the demon lords, can make one look awe-inspiring. Only Luna and Odin have sat on me before. Caesar looked at him from the corner of his eyes and snorted. Are you worthy? Asliers, who was despised, miraculously did not get angry this time. He just laughed and rubbed his hands. How about one more? It's not like you'll lose anything. Let me experience it. If you really become a dragon like Xylan, Mad Clamor, or Geos in the future, this will definitely be a good show that people will talk about. To me, it's even more fulfilling than destroying a world. Just once, you can take me around the North Sea, and I'll just leave a video record. Shut up. Black Dragon exhaled 2 puffs of white air from his nose. The ship is here. This was Quel Doriai's last legacy in this world. It was found when Caesar conquered the other side of the sea, and the Eye of Guish repaired it and modified it into the possession of the Black Wing Empire. On both sides of the hull, there was a symbol of Black Emperor formed by energy. The whole thing looked very smooth, like flowing liquid. Even though this starship was over a kilometer in size, it was still unable to accommodate monsters like the Flame Demon and the Black Dragon. As such, they had no choice but to change their forms. Caesar transformed into his usual demonic dragon human form, while Asliers transformed into the miniature flaming skeleton that he had seen last time with Kuingudios. The cabin door opened, and the winged Dragonians flew out and floated on both sides of the cabin door. They clenched their fists and bowed. We offer our loyalty and life to the supreme, great emperor. Asliers flew in behind Caesar and looked around at the silent Dragonians. Dragon family members are so enviable, unlike those little demons under my command. Don't compare my soldiers to demons. Setting aside their bloodline power, 100 demons aren't as useful as 10 of my soldiers. They are all treasures that the Empire has carefully nurtured. Caesar looked at the drooling Asliers and said, Don't be greedy. If you're willing to join the Empire, I'll give you the position of Great Feudal Lord of the Imperial Court. You can choose any 2 tribes you want to take under your command, and you'll also be able to enjoy the resources provided by the entire Empire. That's not bad, right? Do you want to consider it? What do you think? Asliers asked. Caesar did not continue the conversation. They passed through the bridge and headed towards the central control room. Along the way, there were dragonborn soldiers in armor. The Eye of Gawushi was swaying, and it ran out to greet them. You need this many people to control this starship? Caesar asked with furrowed brows. No. The big eyeball waved its tentacles and quickly explained, This is the army. Didn't you say that there was a combat mission? I picked a group of elite Dragonians from the Imperial Court on the way back. Hey, the eyeball of the evil god of Talos, right? Asliers sneered. It seems that you haven't figured out the situation yet. Do you know who your great emperor's enemy is this time? What can these small soldiers do? They'll be crushed into ashes by the aftermath of the battle. They're useful, the eyeball said sincerely. There are many individual weapons in the starship's armory. I've repaired some of them. If used properly, even a god can be hurt. Quel Doriai. Caesar sighed softly, imagining the glory of the civilization that was destroyed by the Platinum Dragon God and the evil Dragon Mother. If he had been born in that era, he might not have been able to grow up as smoothly as he did today. That's not a god. It's Quintuda, Aslier suddenly said after a long silence. Quintuda, the king of gluttony, the #1 jackal under the monarch of the dark cloud, the monarch of the 173rd level of the abyss. Few people have fought with that thing, but they all say that it's a terrible monster. In the last civil war, everyone thought that it was killed by the demon prince. Aslier said, "Not long ago, I received a message from a friend in the abyss saying that all the chain-tailed demons on the 732nd level had been devoured. They suspected that Quintuda had come back from the dead." "Is it very strong?" "Yes. It's a demon lord that can survive after fighting with the abyss pillar god and Geos. If we met in the abyss, I might tremble in front of it." Aslier said frankly, "In fact, the monarch of the dark cloud can only send a few to the material plane to kill me. Quintuda is the best choice. This guy's characteristics allow it to recover from the weakness of crossing worlds in a short time. By devouring creatures in the main material plane, it was quickly accepted by the Iradia plane. That's why we have to be fast." Caesar understood what Aslier's meant. "That's right. It's best to kill it now," the Flame King said. "It won't be difficult to find that fellow. In order to recover its strength, it needs to eat. Everything that has a physical form will be nibbled into thin air by it. Your empire controls the north and the western continent, and you have an intelligence network and allies all over Eladia. The rest is up to you. Go to the central control room." Caesar took off. The space in the starship's main control room was larger than expected. Energy wires of various colors and intertwined with each other went in different directions along the walls. In the center was a row of crystal screens that did not belong to the current era. The ancient and advanced computing devices were flashing, and the hourglass-shaped particle memory was running, making a rustling sound. Although Quell Dorii is arrogant, it is indeed a very talented and creative race. The eyeball was focused on the information processing on the crystal screen, and Aslier's was chatting with Caesar. What really led to their destruction was not the enslavement of dragons, but the technology of this race. It had developed to the point where it touched the taboo barriers set by the gods. They even wanted to break through this barrier, which led to the gods joining forces to wipe them out. You see, in terms of destruction, the gods and demons are equally good at it. Caesar also looked at the information on the crystal screen and nodded perfunctorily. That's why there are not many highly developed civilizations in the astral plane. That's right. If a race like Quell Dorii is allowed to develop, the gods will have no chance. Can you imagine a scene where a large number of civilizations dominate the material, elements, abyss, and hell planes? Using the gods who have lost their faith to paste walls. TSK, how interesting. Chapter 629. The offshore platform has been attacked. The situation in Scottsdale is tense. The Southern Army of the Rising Sun City has begun to counterattack. A large-scale slave rebellion has occurred in Vilost. Duchess Blakesia is busy suppressing it. The leader of the dragon cultists in the western region of the Rising Sun City has been arrested. Prince Khan has conquered Hijin. Messages flowed through the crystal screen in the starship's main control room. The starship had been upgraded from a weapon to the Black Emperor's flagship. The starship's authority had been upgraded to an unprecedented level. All the information in the Black Wing Empire's intelligence system was gathered here, and the eyeball went through them one by one. Found it. Soon, the eyeball cheered and danced. There is information that Kalva Island has mysteriously disappeared recently. That place is the northernmost part of the Empire's territory, facing the vast Arctic Sea. 7 years ago, the Empire took it under its jurisdiction and set up a post on the island. They even built a small port. There are 100 garrisons on Kalva Island, and they rely on external supplies to sustain themselves. Every month, the Empire will send supplies to the island. The nearest large settlement is the Senka Archipelago. Ships loaded with wood, cloth, food, and wine leave from the Senka Archipelago and travel for 2 days before arriving at Kalva. But this time, the transport team sent a message. They did not find Kalva Island. They wandered around the location marked on the Empire's sea map for a long time, but they did not find any trace of Kalva. After receiving the report, the radiation dragons went to investigate again, but they still found nothing. The lords of the palace thought that the island had sunk. Now it seems that its disappearance is consistent with Quintuta's behavior, the eyeball said. This is the most relevant clue at present. Then let's go and take a look. Caesar nodded. As you wish, the eyeball said. Eyeball exclaimed loudly and introduced. Next, I will demonstrate my unparalleled speed. It will only take 2 minutes to travel from here to where Kalwa Island disappeared. If it is in the astral plane, it can go even faster. If the conditions are met, it will not be a problem to travel between planes. It began to swing the ship, its slender tentacles reaching out in all directions. The starship projected different images in the form of holographic projections, including the state of the energy conversion device, the results of the particle scan, the stability of the spherical shield. All the information was gathered in front of the giant eyeball. After it finished processing a task, it tapped lightly with its tentacles, and the holographic projection disappeared instantly. But a new task to be processed was generated. Nominally, the starship belonged to the Blackwing Empire and belonged to Caesar. However, the real controller was the Eye of Gawushi. It repaired and utilized the lost and damaged ancient technology, extending its tentacles into every corner of the starship. Caesar could destroy the starship, but he could not replace it. Iradia could not find a second person who could control the starship. If we really find Quintuta later and fight, I will control the starship's armed forces to provide you with assistance, the eyeball said. At the same time, I will leave a video recording. Recording? Asliers asked, what for? After a hero, there always needs to be a bard to praise his achievements, so that he can leave behind a magnificent epic. Although the great emperor is not a hero, the things he did must be known, the eyeball said as it shook its head. Eyeball shook its head and said, otherwise those southerners would always think that our great emperor is a heinous villain. They don't know that when they were condemning him, the king of the Black Wings was blocking the invasion of the abyssal demons and fighting to maintain the peace and stability of Eladia. Asliers was not afraid of the barbs. He patted Caesar on the shoulder and said, no wonder dragons like to collect a lot of relatives so vain. The black dragon pretended not to hear. The starship rumbled as it landed and then sank into the Black Sea. Schools of fish of various colors swam past the ship's shield. The total number of creatures in the sea was 10 times that on land. For the king of gluttony, Quintuta, this was a pot of fragrant meat soup, full of fresh and delicious delicacies. Other than the deep sea, Caesar could not think of a better place for the demon to go. Although the Oceanic Abyss City has agreed to assist in the investigation and let the intelligent species in the deep sea help us search, it will still take time, the eyeball said. With the depth and breadth of the Arctic Sea, it will not be easy to find that guy. It's not as hard as you think. Asriers bit down on the molten spar and muttered, before it regains its full strength, Quintuta will not be able to control its desire to devour. It will easily be driven mad by its hunger and will eat everything that can be digested without caring about anything else. As long as we lock onto its general location, we will be able to find it as soon as it eats. Caesar exhaled and was silent for a while before he said slowly, let me say this in advance. We do not know Quintuta's current strength. What will happen next may be simple and smooth, and we can easily work together to kill it, but there's a high probability that there will be accidents. I think if the Lord of the Dark Cloud is not confident, he would not have sent a random guy to land on the material plane and alert us. Asliers, we have known each other for a long time. I form an alliance with you because I trust you. I hope you do not have any other intentions. If there is danger and I am not strong enough, I will think of a way to retreat, but I do not want to see you run away alone. You know the consequences. Caesar's voice became more and more serious. How can that be? Although you are a dragon and I am a demon, we are good brothers who share the same rotten tastes and collude with each other. Asliers snorted. Since you are helping me this time, I will do whatever you say. It is not a problem to block 1 or 2 claws for you, as long as you do not send me to my death. Kuntuta woke up from his deep sleep. He was no longer a mass of sticky fluid. After squeezing the life energy provided by the entire Kalwa Island, Kuntuta completed his own shape in the material plane, a giant demon with 2 heads. Kuntuta stood up under the heavy pressure of the deep sea. The cold seawater was filled with a faint fishy smell. A giant silver axefish was swimming in front of him with a devil shark in its mouth. The king of gluttony grinned and strode over. When he was less than 10 meters away from the silver axefish, he suddenly stopped. In the deep sea, where countless creatures were shaking their heads and wagging their tails, the giant demon who suddenly stood still seemed out of place. Something was watching him. Kuntuta was keenly aware of this. He did not need to turn around to see more than 10 hunting sharks staring at him. According to his perception, there were more sea creatures coming from afar. Good food delivered to his door. Kuntuta stretched and took a deep breath of seawater, awakening his unparalleled strength and unparalleled will. The calm aura was strengthened 1,000 times. The Lord of the Abyss descended on the material plane. He looked around in the deep sea like a king looking at trembling lambs. Chapter 630. 20 minutes later, the Black Emperor appeared at the scene of the incident. The Seafolk's army had already sealed off the area. Deep-sea headhunters held their weapons, their small eyes flashing in the dark space as they stood in a circle on alert. A huge whale shark's long tail stirred the seawater, letting out a thunderous roar as it left behind a whirlpool more than 10 meters in diameter. It stopped in front of the starship, its head a dark red exoskeleton that looked like cracked lava. This guy seems to be bigger than you. Asliers looked at the starship's crystal screen and clicked his tongue. Caesar nodded. In Iradia, the underwater world is much larger than the land, and the food chain is much tighter. It's not difficult to grow creatures larger than the land. Unfortunately, the size of the body doesn't determine the strength of power, or else the sea folk would have the final say in this world. This is the Sea Lord of the Far North, the eyeball introduced. It's requesting to communicate with us. The Black Dragon agreed, and the connection was established. I bow to you, respected king of the land and sky. Your fame reaches far and wide. On behalf of the sea folk, I offer you my sincere respect. The whale shark lord in front of them was actually a female, and its voice was unexpectedly tender. It sounded very young, like a 3 or 5-year-old human child. Caesar thought for a moment, then casually asked, "Are those demonic fish still alive?" The whale shark lord lowered its head. "The kings are fine. Some time ago, the ancient king Barasso woke up from his long slumber and said that he could live for another 2,000 years. Those demonic fish are like loaches. What's the difference between being alive and being dead? When the Storm Lord and the Sun God fought, the sea folk that could go ashore were basically all killed, and not a single demonic fish made a move." Asliers said casually, "Caesar, if you go and destroy their nest now, I think those guys will just cry out a few times and run away with their tails wagging." At this time, the Balrog noticed that the whale shark's gaze seemed to penetrate the shell of the astral world and was staring at him. He immediately glared back and said, "What? You want to treat me to grilled fish? I'm not interested in the deep sea. Even if I conquer Iradia in the future, the underwater world will still be under the jurisdiction of the sea race." Caesar said, looking at the giant whale shark, "Now is not the time to discuss this. We are looking for Kuntuta. Do you have anything to say?" The voice of the Sea Lord became serious. "I've been searching for that monster since a long time ago. It appeared once at the south-facing estuary and ate all the fish and seabed relics there. After that, I received news from the kings in the far north that it was a demon named Kuntuta. My guards found it here, but they were all killed before I received the message. You should be glad that you came late." Asliers sneered coldly. "That's no ordinary demon. If you happen to run into it, you can only be fish soup." The whale shark Lord Ya turned his head, pretending not to hear Aslier's words, and said to Caesar, "I can lead you to track Kuntuda." In the mouth of the Southerners, the black dragon was a monster who did all kinds of evil, but in the eyes of the sea race, he was a king worthy of respect and admiration. Even the demonic fish at the bottom of the sea were full of praise when they talked about Caesar. Even if he had the annoying Asliers by his side, Huya still wanted to get closer to this king of the land. "You?" The Balrog looked up and down at the giant whale. "What are you capable of?" Caesar glanced at Asliers. This guy was usually a chatterbox, and his words were not pleasant to listen to. Today, he seemed to be more serious. The whale shark lord shook his head, closed his eyes, and pondered. The dark red exoskeleton on top of his head shone, and the seawater that was illuminated by the light gradually dimmed, outlining gray-black lines. These lines coiled around a huge, bloated body and surged into it. It looked like a child's sketch with a pencil. What do these black lines mean? Are they visible energy ripples? Or are they your neural circuits? Asliers grinned. "It's life energy," Huya said. Huya said, "My talent is to examine life from a different perspective. In my opinion, you're like a volcano that can erupt at any time. Emperor Caesar is like a gentle and stable sun, and Kuntuda is a walking black hole. It is swallowing the life of other things and stuffing them into its body. That black hole can't control its gravity. Wherever it goes, the life energy will be shifted. I can see the imprints left behind by these lives before they disappear. They are firmly and stubbornly pointing to the initiator. I can lead you to Kuntuda." "Okay." Caesar smiled. "Since you know what Kuntuda is, little guy, aren't you afraid?" "I'm not afraid." This whale shark, which was already 300 meters long and larger than any creature on land, did not show any discomfort when it was called little guy by Black Dragon. It was as if all this was natural. It lowered its head slightly and said, "As the Lord of the Extreme North, I should protect all the sea creatures in the territory. If I die, please help me tell the kings of the deep sea that there will be someone to replace me." "Then let's go," Asliers said. The whale shark's long tail swayed slowly, and then an amazing power burst out. The entire sea was stirred up by her, and more than 10 vortexes appeared one after another. The sea creature's army followed behind her, and the starship slowly hung at the end. Kuntuda stood at the bottom of the sea, looking at the buildings in front of him. It was not particularly easy for him to adapt to the rules of the material plane. As his power gradually recovered, the number of lives he needed to devour also increased exponentially. The situation that he was monitored before showed that the news of him landing in Iradia had been leaked. If the gods reacted quickly enough, they should already be thinking of ways to deal with him. Asliers would most likely take action as well. From a worst-case scenario, he might have to face the joint efforts of the gods, demons, Asliers, the empire on which the sun never sets, and the Blackwing Empire to kill him. However, if he recovered his power, his pursuers would become his endless, delicious food. It all depended on who acted faster. The buildings in front of him were the ruins of a land civilization that sank to the bottom of the sea. After the sea creatures in the extreme north discovered this place, they occupied the ruins as a settlement. Now, this city in the deep sea had nearly 1 million residents. Kuntuda could feel the majestic vitality around him. A tsunami rose from the sea. Kuntuda licked his lips. He saw the surge of energy, and his undisguised heartbeat rushed in. The sea creature's army here was alarmed, and they flooded out of the city. Thousands of big fish and sea monsters floated in the dark water, magnificent and vast. Chapter 631. Kuntuda was holding a crab leg and eating it silently in the corridor of the ruins. He had already fought with the army of the sea tribe in the far north. The leader was a many-legged scorpion crab, which was slightly more powerful than an ordinary legendary. It looked like a general or a lord. The many-legged scorpion crab was very good at fighting and was familiar with the deep-sea environment. Its shell was extremely hard, and it had 30,000 giant pincer crabs under its command. It was quite a difficult opponent for ordinary land creatures. Unfortunately, it had encountered a demon from the abyss. Kuntuta stuffed the crab leg into his mouth, chewed twice, and spat out the broken shell. Kuntuta kicked this small crab out of his diet. After swallowing a large number of sea creatures, his body had almost recovered. If he wanted to be completely healed, he would have to find some high-quality food. He would have to eat less of the many-legged scorpion crabs in the future. Kuntuta had a faint sense of uneasiness. This sense of uneasiness might be due to the pressure of being noticed by the gods, or perhaps it was due to the keen intuition of wandering on the edge of danger for many years. He felt as if something was following behind him, tailing and tracking him. This feeling made Kuntuta very unhappy, so he decided to slow down, sit down, and wait. A few minutes later, a huge whale shark swam into the sea. The whale shark closed its eyes, but the exoskeleton on its head shone brightly. It slowly turned its head and hovered in the water. Kuya saw the dissipating life, energy, and the wandering souls of the dead wandering around her. They cried and howled, and a high concentration of negative emotions pressed in from all directions. She realized that they had just died not long ago, and the place of the incident was not far from here. The whale shark lord continued to swim forward. Then she saw the demon. The king of gluttony was sitting in the ruins of the deep sea. He was eating, immersed in the joy of munching on the sumptuous food. The starlight in the settlement dimmed one after another. In Huya's eyes, it was a dark, deep vortex with a terrifying gravitational force. The life force without any temperature exuded a coldness as hard as iron, radiating naked primitive desires, twisted greed, and insatiable greed. The Balrog king left the starship and returned to his huge, terrifying skeleton form. Fire burned in the sea. "Caught you," he said. "Asliers." Kuntuta continued to chew, a low sneer coming from his throat. "I thought you would escape from Iradia and become a stray dog in the astral boundary. I didn't expect a trash like you to have the courage to appear in front of me." Kuntuta made a mistake. He seriously misjudged the current situation. He thought that he was only facing Asliers, but he did not notice that there was another existence at the scene. When he realized the danger, Caesar had already appeared behind him. He saw a thick, strong, barbed claw raised behind him. In the next instant, the claw passed through Kuntuta's chest. Caesar, who was disguised as a human, grabbed Kuntuta's shoulder and dug his right claw into the king of gluttony's heart. Poisonous blood spurted out like a fountain before he retracted his claw. Ah! Kuntuta let out a groan and took a deep breath. Before he could move, the giant claw crushed one of his heads, and the neck of the other head was bitten off. His body was like a ripe fruit, exploding under the external force, juice splattering everywhere. "So fast," the whale shark lord exclaimed. She had said before that in her eyes, Emperor Caesar was like a gentle and stable son, and it was difficult to ignore him. However, she did not know when Caesar left the starship or when he appeared behind Kuntuta. The energy waves produced by the Black Emperor's movements were close to zero. This exquisite control of energy reminded Huya of the legendary Pale Shadow. It was said that those evil beasts were born in the chaos where light and darkness intertwined. They swam in the places closest to the origin sea and launched surprise attacks on their targets in the same way. They killed legendary creatures and abominations, and even some main gods have been attacked by them. "Is it over?" the whale shark lord asked in surprise. Asliers glanced at her with a look of disdain, as if to say that she was ignorant. Was it so easy to kill a demon lord? Then he shook his head. The blood in Kuntuta's body seemed to be squeezed out endlessly, but he did not care. He simply turned around slowly and stared at Caesar with the only bloody eye on his broken head. There was no anger, fear, or any other intense emotions in his eyes, but only calmly observing and judging. With a muffled sound of broken bones, he broke free from the black dragon's claws and fell to the ground. He then stood up in a sorry state. "Iradia's Black-Winged King, right?" Kuntuta gasped. Caesar did not reply. He moved his claws and felt the characteristics of his opponent's power. He did not feel the exhaustion of life force, so he guessed that the king of gluttony did not have the ability to directly absorb life force. This demon needed to swallow its prey into its stomach to digest it. No wonder Asliers dared to come. It turns out that he has an ally. Kuntuta held his neck with one hand so that his head would not fall off his shoulder and pressed the hole in his chest with the other. These two wounds looked extremely fatal. Blood gushed out from the gaps between his claws and merged into the sea, forming a filthy cloud. The scene was horrifying, but he just talked to himself, his eyes moving between the black dragon and the Balrog. Yes, yes. Aslier smiled sinisterly and stepped forward. I dared to come because I have an ally. What about you? How dare you come to Iradia to die? You think you're qualified to say that? Kuntuta laughed. The blood on his body slowly stopped. He looked at Caesar. There was no anger from the sneak attack or fear of death in his eyes. There was only curiosity about the black dragon, as if he had seen some new delicacy for the first time. You should have continued to attack me. The sneak attack just now was indeed unexpected. If you had continued to attack and joined forces with the useless Asliers, not giving me a chance to breathe, perhaps you could have forced me into a desperate situation. But the opportunity was fleeting. Kuntuta's body stored a vast amount of life force. Under the effect of this life force, his injuries quickly healed. A new head emerged from his shoulder, and the hole in his chest was smoothed out. This demon's aura rose steadily, approaching the critical point of the material plane. You've been talking and stalling to buy time for yourself to recover. Of course I know that. Have you regenerated? Have you recovered your strength? Caesar twisted his neck, revealing his huge body. The steel-like black dragon stood in the deep sea, his fangs sharp and his eyes cold. I haven't exercised for a long time. It will be a pity to kill you now. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.